the Dutch defense against D4. Now, this is one of the most requested video. Everybody is saying they want the Dutch defense. Here's the Dutch defense. Now, usually we're gonna see D4, C4, knight C3. I like to play moves like pawn to E6, and then they develop, and then we play bishop to B4. Now, the whole idea is, let's say they play E3 and they're trying to develop. We're gonna be eventually giving up this bishop for the knight. So this is the setup. I just want you guys to know the setup. We're gonna play the move pawn B6. We're going to play the move bishop b7. Like anytime they attack our bishop, we're always going to take on c3. And then we're going to play the move pawn d6. Let's say they develop, we play knight d7. And this is basically the setup that we're going for. There's so many attacking, aggressive ideas in this line. For example, there's queen e8 to h5. There's king h8, rook g8, pawn g5, pawn g4. There's knight e4, rook f6, rook h6, queen e8, queen h5. And then all of this attack is going to be brutal going against the opponent's king. So if you're trying to beat d4 with the Dutch defense, I want you to watch this full video, apply the stuff that I teach, and watch your ratings go through the roof. Kicking things off in the 500 region. Today I'm going to be showing you guys the Dutch defense. It's very aggressive. Pawn to c4, we play knight to f6. And it's basically a line where we play against d4, or mainly we play it against the Queen's Gambit type of setup, where the knight goes to c3, we play e6, and our main idea is to play bishop b4, get rid of the knight, which is one of the main pieces that protects the e4 square, and then we castle and then start some attack on the opponent's king. Now, based on my experience, it's good to play, well, after bishop g5, we're just going to castle. It's good to have a knight on d7 and a bishop on b7. I've been telling people that it doesn't matter which one they put first, but I actually already played the game against the 1800 guy, and he kind of showed me that it's very important that I fianchetto the bishop first, because he decided to fianchetto his bishop and it was a weird game. So bishop e2, we play bishop b7, and then we're going to be playing pawn d6, knight d7. So he decides to castle his king, and I like the idea of just taking the knight now, just to give him a bad structure. Usually I wait until he attacks the knight, but he didn't attack the knight, so let's just play d6, knight d7. And the good thing is, we now have this position where all our pieces are active. We have the attack on the king. What did we have to lose to get such good position? And you guys should know, we do not have the bishop here. The opponent has the bishop here. But usually bishop here is good when the position is just really closed. Queen b3, apply some pressure to e6, which means pawn c5 is an idea. We're not afraid of this though. So let's just play knight d7, continue the plan. If the pawn moves to c5, then okay, I'm thinking of playing bishop d5, allow him to play pawn c4, and then just put my bishop somewhere, and then the queen is no longer going to be attacking e6. Knight back to d2 is usually one of the main ideas here. I'm not gonna lie. So for a 500 player to be spotting this, it's really cool. Basically, it's good to exchange his bishop for my bishop, because my bishop is usually better than his bishop. All right, so let's continue with the plan. We're going to be playing queen to e8, getting out of the spin, queen to h5 eventually to hit the bishop, rook takes rook over, and start the attack on his king. So also, if he plays bishop f3, to keep more pieces on the board, I could play knight e4. And if bishop takes, I take. Slight downside of this though, the light squared bishop could be a bit blocked in, but sometimes it helps because it prevents them from playing f3. Okay, rook to b1 was played. Not sure why he didn't just continue with his plan, but this could even be losing though. Like, what if I play queen g6, attack the bishop? Or if queen b6 attacks the bishop, there's bishop f3. And then if I take the bishop at that point, the knight guards the bishop. So maybe I need to sacrifice the bishop first. After king takes, then I play queen to g6. At that point, he's going to be able to guard the bishop, but pawn h6, then I take. Yeah, that's actually a very nice idea. Bishop takes g2, very nice idea. This is also another idea that you guys could use when this bishop is on the g5 square. So king takes, we play queen g6. This guy's talking in the chat about, he's asking me if he's playing good. He needs to lock in and just play pawn to f4. Let's play pawn h6. There's also pawn h4 here though. So I mean, yeah, the guy's playing decent. After pawn h4 and I take, he takes back with the pawn and he's fine. So maybe sacrificing there was rushing the position a bit. Maybe I should have just went with immediate queen g6, but he needs to play pawn to h4 here. All right, knight to f3 was played instead. Let's just take though. And once he plays knight takes, now I'm going to play the move knight to e4, which is a very strong move because not only am I applying pressure to his pin knight, I'm threatening this triple fork on d2. So he's asking me if he's playing well. He needs to lock in and not get tripled forked. Bishop to f3 would be a nice move, but then I may take sack the rook because if he takes the rook, we get discovered attacks on his king. And if he takes back on g5, we check him first and then we save the rook. But he didn't guard the fork, he didn't guard the rook. What I'm seeing though is now that he plays pawn c5, e6 is under attack. So I don't think I should even try to grab the rook. But, well, because if I hit the queen, he takes. I takes, knight takes, hit the knight. There's also knight c7, which is weird. So let's just get rid of the knight. Once he takes, we take. Enjoy our extra pawn. His pawn on e3 is also going to be hanging, and I'm not expecting him to play king f3. So king back to h1 was played. The queen attacks e6. So now I'm actually wait. If I play queen takes, there's bishop f3. And then rook e1 is coming. So queen takes bishop f3. Oh, yeah. But now I'm able to play rook here. So queen takes is actually a nice move. Guard the pawn. Bishop f3 hits the rook and it threatens rook e1. But at that point, I'm going to play rook e8. And then if he plays rook e1, I play queen h6 and everything is going to be guarded. So we're now just enjoying two extra pawns. He plays rook e1 first. Wasn't expecting that, but that's a nice move. And since he's going to play rook e1 first, I'm going to play queen h6 as well because but there's, okay, bishop c4, I'm able to play d5. And if bishop f3, there's rook to e8. So like my position, and I'm still enjoying these two extra pawns. Bishop to b5. That's the move because my knight is unprotected. All right. First of all, we have to save the knight. So let's just save the knight, which, oh my lord, two pawns are going to fall. Look at that. Another strong 500 strikes again. But okay, I think I'm going to win this game due to a very bad blunder. Because, usually these 500 players, they play very well. But then the blunder that they make is just very bad. But let's see. All right. So queen takes check. Let's move the king out of the way. There are some ideas of rook e1, but maybe no time soon since the bishop is there. So I'm thinking about chasing away the bishop first. If he plays rook takes though, then rook to e8 could actually be a very nice move. So he needs to play queen takes. But then if he play queen takes, his queen is on the same line as my rook. Knight g4, there's queen takes. Knight e4, there's queen takes. All right, so pawn takes was played first. Let's just take back on d6. That seems pretty much forced. Tell you about these 500 players, man. Always play so well and then boom, blunder. Is it a blunder though? Is it even a blunder? I think I'm gonna play rook to e8. Bishop takes, hit the queen. But there's actually rook takes f6 here, which is winning. And if I take his queen, he takes my queen with check. So let's just play pawn to a6 first, trying to get the bishop off of this diagonal, and then rook to e8 is going to be winning. So if he pulls the bishop back, we play b5. The move that he needs to play here is bishop c6, hits the rook, and then I may play rook to c8, hit the bishop. Let's see though. All right, bishop all the way back to d2. Now should be losing. Rook to e8. Now if he sacrificed the rook, I'm just going to take with the pawn. And then if he sacked the queen, I take. He takes, I play king up. And once I'm not losing my queen at that point, I should be fine. So rook to e8 here is just a strong move. There's no queen move that he could play to save his rook. Sacrificing the rook is actually the best move. Wait, if he sacked the rook, what if I just take with the queen though? Nah, because then he sacked the queen, and then I'm either mated or I lose the game. So if he sacked the rook, I take with the pawn. He sacked the queen, I takes. He take with the rook, I play king up. I'm not losing my queen. Maybe he get a check, I move, and eventually my queen will beat his rook and bishop. All right, so we've seen queen takes d6. Let's grab the free rook. The king is now forced to move. Well, he blocks the check. You shouldn't be trading, bro, to be honest, because you're down by a piece. I should be the one who's trading. Okay, my rook is now unprotected, so we need to do something about that. So let's just play rook to e8 here. I'm threatening to play rook to e1. There's also queen to c1, which pins the bishop. So the moment he allows me to pin his bishop, things is going to go left for him. There's also knight g5. All right, queen takes b6. We pin the bishop. Yeah, let's just pin the bishop first. Any check that he plays, I'm going to be able to move my king. And I think he's going to take on a6, which he did. But now I'm able to play moves like queen to f4, PP on the PP. Yes, he's able to add more defense to the bishop, but I could bring even more pieces in the attack. So this is definitely going to be a checkmating attack. Queen to h1 check. Let's just move the king to h7, which means there's two pieces attacking the bishop. He has zero pieces guarding the bishop. He pulls the queen back, but now this is checkmating too. Played very well though. But now I play rook takes f1 check. The queen has to take, and he resigns. More Dutch defense against 600 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 600. Let's play some more Dutch defense. Very, very interesting username this guy has. Let's go knight to f6 though. And after knight c3, we play pawn to e6. So this is the whole idea of the Dutch. I'm trying to play bishop to b4 to pin this knight. Pawn e3. Now we play bishop to b4, knight f3, and now we simply get the king out the center of the board. Now this guy, this guy's playing pretty well for 600. Let's see. Bishop to d3. We play b6. The plan is to play bishop b7. He got the king out the center of the board quickly. Let's develop our bishop to b7. He's playing very quickly though. Bishop d2 develops his bishop. Let's continue with the plan. Pawn d6, knight d7, pawn h3. I mean, generally we don't want to be pushing pawns on the side that our king is on for no reason. Let's just go knight d7 here. And I'm assuming he's going to play a3, then I take. He didn't, so I'm trying to start my attack. This move, queen to e8, is always going to be very thematic. I mean, the queen could go to g6 or h5, so let's do that. And then if he play a3, I kind of want him to invest the move into letting me take the knight, and then I could start jumping in. All right, knight to h4. It's a weird move. Like, I can just play pawn g5 and just force the knight to move. I think he's trying to prevent queen g6. But here's what I'm going to do. Let's play king to h8 first, because I may play pawn to g5. And if you're going to be making the decision to push pawns on the side that your king is on, then it's very important that your king is safe. All right, so that move is also very suspicious, bro. Bro, slow down. Please slow down. He moved the knight out the way, so I kind of have to take his bishop, which is not the best bishop, but he definitely just made a mistake, because after queen takes, this knight is on the edge of the board. The queen is just not covering the f3 square. So once I play g5, he has to pull the knight back to f3. We take the knight on f3, and his king side is going to be shattered. Yeah, why is this guy playing so fast though? Let's take the knight. I think maybe he thinks he's playing a bullet game or something. Let's see if he's going to continue to play fast with his king being this exposed. I'm going to continue my attack. Unprotected pawn, queen h5, attack both the pawns at the same time. King h2 was played. He decided to guard this one, but not this one. But what if I play g4 though? Like pawn g4, if he takes, I takes, and his g pawn is going to die. Unless after pawn g4 takes, he goes knight g1. So let's just grab the free pawn first. Just grab the free pawn, then I could play pawn to g4. In a lot of lines, I'm trying to go rook to g8 and then pawn to g4. Knight back to g1. Okay, fair enough. My queen is under attack. Let's just pull the queen back to h5. It's actually the only square for the queen. And I'm expecting bishop e2 or queen d2. I'm expecting that. And this is the point where we play g4, because the pawn is pinned. Pinned pieces don't protect. And I'm also defending my queen. Now, pulling the bishop back to e2 also leaves the e4 square unprotected. So my knight could jump in to e4. And he's pushing more pawns on the side that his king is on. Bro, slow down. Let's hit the queen. Let's just hit the queen. Rook to g8 is coming next. It's kind of annoying that my queen is on the same line as his bishop, though. So I'm really thinking about getting my queen off of that. But rook g8, knight f6, these are very active moves that I could play. So queen e1, fair enough. Not bad. Not bad at all. Oh, maybe he wants to play h4, but I'm not afraid of that. Let's play rook to g8. If h4, I play g3 check. Oh, but then there's king h3. Let's see. Pawn d5, not 100% sure why. I mean, queen is not going there. Maybe if I takes, the rook gets the file and he's attacking this. So what I'm going to do is play rook a to e8, protecting my pawn. So now if he takes, I takes, and now I can also play rook h6, which apply even more pressure to h3. All right, so queen moved out the way, which means queen d4 check is now an idea, which I'm not afraid of. Is if queen d4, I block the check. I could also block the check with the knight. I want to get my queen. Let's play queen back to h6 because I want to take this pawn. I want to finally take this pawn. He took. Do I just ignore the fact that he just took a pawn and just take this pawn? And if he thinks he's winning a knight, I check. And then after he pulls his king back, that's mate. Will he fall for that? Let's try that. Let's try that. Let's just take the pawn and say, oh no, my knight. I just blundered my knight. And if he takes the knight, it's over. It's just checkmate in two moves. Maybe he's gonna check on d4 though. Like it looks like an attractive check, but then I'm just gonna block with the knight. Ah, he fell right into it. He took the free knight. He thought about it as well. But this is not checkmate in two moves. We check on g2, and now the king just has to go to h1, and that's just a checkmate. More Dutch defense against 700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 700. Let's play some more Dutch defense. Pawn c4, we're going to play knight to f6 here. Pawn e6, bishop b4. Knight c3, we go pawn e6, bishop b4 is the next move. Usually they play a3. Some people play a3. But just remember, if you see a3, it means they don't want you to pin. And if they do this, just put the bishop on e7 and just do the same entire setup that we've been talking about. Knight f3, now we're going to pin though. It's usually a bit better if we pin because the queen also gets the chance to get to the e7 square, and the attack that we get is just way better. Bishop d2 was played. Okay, let's get the king out the center of the board. And the good thing is, you guys know exactly what we're going to be doing with these minor pieces. The knight is going on d7, which means we have to move the pawn to d6. The bishop is going on b7, which means we have to move the pawn to b6. And all our minor pieces will be developed at that point, and then we're going to be starting the attack. It's usually a nice idea. Like whenever they choose to fianchetto their bishop, that's usually a nice idea. So he's basically trying to fianchetto his bishop. And I want you guys to please be on the lookout for any tactical stuff that may happen with this bishop. Now, a3, we're definitely going to be eliminating the knight. And then once the bishop takes, we play bishop to b7. Now, what I mean about tactics on this diagonal is, well, it's not going to happen now. So let's just play d6 and continue with the idea because his bishop is unprotected. But the moment he castle and his bishop is protected, we now have to be on the lookout for knight g5 because a move like knight g5 could be potentially attacking our unprotected bishop and threatening a fork on e6. If he plays knight g5 now, I'm just going to take his bishop. And if he forks, we move the queen and his rook is going to be under attack. We take the knight and black is going to be better at that point. All right, pawn e3 was played. Let's go knight d7 here. Still not afraid of knight g5. Knight e4 is coming next. Knight f6 could also be a move, just cementing the knights on the e4 square. And then we're going to be looking to do our kingside attack. So he castled his king. Now we play knight e4. Usually, whenever a piece is on your half of the board, you should try to get rid of that piece. So a move like knight to d2 here, wouldn't be surprised if he plays that. If knight d2 though, then I'm just going to play knight to f6. Again, I'm just trying to add as much support to my knight on the e4 square. Queen to d3 was played. Okay, fair enough. And okay, I have a little dilemma here. I'm wondering if I should first do the rook cliff, then play knight f6. Because if I do the rook cliff, now I can play g5, g4 and hit the knight, and then I could attack the h2 pawn. However, if I play a move like rook f6, I need to be aware that the rook is going to be on the same line as my bishop, and he could play d5, but then I could just play e5 and I'm fine. So we're going to be going, wait, yeah, we're going to be going with the rook cliff. If d5, I play e5, my bishop is not going to be the best piece, but my knight is also going to get access to c5. Now he plays pawn to b4, which is the correct thing. I'm trying to attack on the king side, and he's basically trying to counterattack on the queen side. Now there's this plan. It takes a while, but queen e8 to h5, pawn g5 to g4, chase away this knight, and then try to take on h2. Or queen e8 to h5, and then try to find other ways to get rid of this knight, like knight to g5. And then if he takes, we take on h2, and that's mate. So pawn to d5 was played. I mean, I could take stakes, but I'm just gonna play pawn to e5 here, so that way I get more control over these central squares. Like a knight is now not able to go to d4. The bishop is also kind of blocked off. I mean, my bishop is also blocked off. He pulls the bishop back to d2, and okay, again we're trying to continue with the attack. Let's go queen to e8. Plan is to play queen to h5. I'm expecting some knight d2 ideas, you know, trying to get rid of my very strong knight on e4. Once he does that, I'm just gonna take though. Like if I get my queen on h5 and in time, then he's not gonna be able to play knight d2. Come on, bro. This guy was playing so well. Why would you put your knight on that square? Maybe he's trying to put the knight here, but that's just a free knight, bro. I've heard someone said that like a move where you have to move a backward minor piece back is very hard moves to find. But I mean, the guy was playing okay, but just a knight, bro, that's kind of crazy. I mean, I'm still gonna play queen h5 next move and try to threaten some checkmates. And then if pawn h4, I play knight to f3 check. And then if the king move, I sack on h5. And if the bishop takes, I play queen takes. All right, so rook moved over to b1. Queen is heading to h5. So I'm threatening h2. I want to put a knight on f3. This knight could also join the attack. I could also swing this rook over, but I really don't think I'm going to have to use this rook or this bishop. Like, I think these three pieces plus this knight is going to be enough to win this game. Ooh, queen takes f5. I wasn't expecting. The guy just grabbed a free pawn. So he's basically saying, hey, I don't care about h2. You could take h2. All right, so let's take on h2. We take on h2 with check, which means the king has to go to f1. And yeah, usually whenever there's a fianchetted bishop, things gets tricky. I now have two unprotected pieces, so I have to be very, very careful. I'm thinking of playing rook to f8 though. But then he's gonna take rook f6. He's still gonna take. How do I do this? Don't tell me that I'm just blundering back the piece. Seriously? Am I just blundering back the piece here? That's crazy. Like, is there a way where I could not lose one of my knights? Like knight f6, there's queen takes. Unless I'm able to trap that queen. Knight f6, queen takes, rook h5. Oh my lord. That's the way. This is the way. Because now if the queen takes rook h5 and the queen is trapped, that's crazy. I didn't see that, but you notice what I did? I asked the right questions. So that could help you in chess as well. He's just not able to take the knight. It's hanging, yes, but he just can't take it. He did take the knight and rook h5, and that's a queen. I mean, there's just no way for this queen to go. So I'm assuming he's going to sack the queen for the rook, and then this rook will eventually join the attack. You know, I want to put it on the same line as his king. Yeah, so he sacked the queen. Let's just take. There's some little knight takes g6 ideas, especially if I'm able to play rook to f8. So that's definitely my next move. Pawn to c4. That's bad, bro. Look at this. Moving the pawn to c4 means this diagonal is open. The king is the only defender of the bishop, which means once I check, the king now has to step away from defending the bishop, and then we take a free bishop. That tactic is called removing the guard. But there's another thing that I want to tell you guys. Whenever you see a good move, look for a better one. Like this bishop is dead. Like we're always going to be able to take the bishop, but to find the best move in chess, we look for checks, captures, and threats. If I check on g1 and the bishop block, I'm still going to take. If he moves his king to d2, I mean, the bishop is dead, but I'm going to actually take on f2 first with check. And then when he moves the king, unless I have a checkmate, I'm just going to take the bishop. So that's also important for you guys to know. So the king move, we check. Let's see where he's going to put the king because I actually don't necessarily have to take the bishop. Well, wait, he puts the king here. Can I check? King has to go here and then I check. Wait, if let's check here. This has to be better. Like if the king has to go back, then I can always win the bishop. Whenever you see a good move, please look for a better one. Look at this. King and the rook is on the same line. Wait, is that's not mate. There's king back. So we check here. Now, if the king goes here, that's mating too. So the king has to go here. And then even if the king goes here, I just take the rook and it's a free rook because it's going to be a discovered attack on his king. But he decided to go to d1, which means this is now just checkmate in two moves. We check on e2. The king now has to go to c1. And that's just a checkmate. More Dutch defense against 800 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 800. Let's play some more Dutch defense. So c4 we go knight to f6, controlling the light squares. Knight c3 we go e6, and usually we want to put the bishop on b4. We want to give up that bishop for the knight, by the way. And if you're not able to put the bishop on e4, we put the bishop on e7. Bishop f4 was played. It kind of looks like a Joe Bava London with the pawn on c4. But let's just continue with our idea. Bishop goes to b4. Usually persons put the bishop on at least g5 to pin my knight. Now, from here, it's just a matter of castling, fianchettoing this bishop, putting the knight on d7, and starting some attack. So pawn e3, we get the king out the center of the board. Bishop to d3 was played. Now I'll play pawn to b6. Again, the more light square control that we get, the better it is. Knight f3, we go bishop b7. Eventually, we're going to be taking that knight on c3. I usually like to take the knight when they attack my bishop, so that way he has to invest a move into me taking his knight, basically. But anyways, he castled his king. Now we play d6. Eventually, we're going to be planting a very annoying knight on the e4 square. But remember, we don't want to start any attack too quickly. It's very important that we finish our development first. Now that pawn a3 was played, that's the time to give up the bishop for a knight. Because remember, that was our intention anyways. Now our development is complete. So we've gotten the dream Dutch position. We gave up the bishop for the knight. We have the control over the e4 square. What's the plan from here? The plan from here is to start an attack on the opponent's king. So we're talking about moves like knight e4. We're talking about moves like rook f6, rook g6, queen e8, queen g5, maybe even king to h8, rook to g8. Knight to g5, you're going to see knight to g5 a lot because it attacks the e6 pawn, which is usually unprotected. But now I'm going to play this move, queen to e8. I mean, eventually the plan was to play queen g6 or queen h5, but I'm just trying to protect the e6 pawn first. And another thing that you guys could keep in mind is sometimes you can also play e5 to hit this bishop, or now that the knight is on g5, h6 to hit this knight. Rook to e1 was played. The good thing is we have a lot of control over the e4 square. So here's what I'm going to play. I'm going to continue with the plan of playing queen g6. This is a drawback move, by the way, but I'm aware of the fact that the knight is just not able to take on e6. And eventually, I'm going to be able to use this rook to defend the e6 pawn. And I'm also thinking about some h6 ideas. All right, pawn to g6 was now played. This is creating some light squares, light square weaknesses around this king. And pawn to e5. Pawn to e5 seems to be winning a bishop because the bishop is now trapped. So what if I just play pawn to e5 now? If he takes, I takes. There's nowhere for the bishop. I mean, there's always knight e6 though. And knight e6 hits the rook. But once I play rook to c8 and guard my pawn, his bishop is still going to be trapped. At that point, there's bishop g5 though. And then maybe he's going to take here. So let's just play rook to e8 first. Let's defend against this. And then the plan is to play e5. Pawn c5 was played. Pawn c5, maybe he wants to put a bishop or a queen on this diagonal so that way he's able to apply more pressure to e6. Pawn e5 definitely traps the bishop now. Definitely traps the bishop. If he checks, then there's pawn to d5 and then he's going to have two pieces under attack. But then pawn takes and that should not be too bad for him. So pawn e5, there's check. What if I take first? Or what if I play h6 hit the knight? I could play h6 hit the knight, and if knight takes, then I just take because bishop c4 will not work. So let's go with h6. Yeah, let's go with h6 hits the knight. If he takes any of my pawns, I take the knight, hit the bishop, and I'm just winning. Ah, yeah, knew he would have gone for this. It looks attractive, because my rook now has to take, and all of a sudden there's bishop c4. Well, queen to b3 is also a move, but now I'm thinking of bishop d5 hit the queen. Bishop d5 hits the queen, and if pawn c4, then I go bishop e4, and my rook is no longer pinned. If bishop c4, I takes pawn d5 hits the queen. So guy just gave me a free piece. So let's just go bishop d5, hit the queen, and from here we're just enjoying our free piece. Like if I'm able to play, let's say queen h5 to f3, then that would lead to a mate. But let's just play with the free piece. Bishop c4, we take on c4, forcing the queen to take. Yes, the rook is trapped, but pawn d5 hits the queen. So now we're forcing the queen to move. My c7 pawn is going to be hanging in the end, so I may need to do something about that. But if I'm able to get my knight on e4, that's a nice square for a knight. Okay, queen to a6 is not a bad move because if I take on c5, I'm actually going to lose the rook. He's attacking this unprotected pawn and he's also attacking this unprotected pawn. In that case, I have some ideas of just going for the king, to be very honest. Like queen h5, he takes the pawn, knight g5. But then at that point, there's pawn to h5. But then I go rook to g6, put the rook on the same line as the king, take on, no, I can't take on h4 just yet. All right, how am I going to do this? Let's go with queen to h5. If he takes the pawns, I may play queen h3 so that way he's not able to play h4 because once my knight gets to the g4 square, then there won't be anything that he's able to do to protect this h2 pawn. All right, he plays pawn to h4 pretty quickly. And in order to continue with the attack, I'm going to play pawn to g5 to hit the bishop. Now, keep in mind, if he takes, I take, well, maybe there's bishop takes, but if he decides to take, I don't even have to take back. I could just go knight g4, and then I'm threatening some checkmating ideas. So again, still has to be careful. And then once I eventually decide to take back, his bishop is going to be under attack. I could swing the rook over to h6 and then checkmate him on h1. Bishop takes e7 was played, not bad. All right. In this position, let's just take on h5. We're trying to expose this king as best as possible. If he takes back on h4, it's going to be a bit bad for him. So I'm trying to get my knight and my rook into the attack here. Okay, he did take back. And from here, we're trying to start the attack. I mean, if I takes, there's bishop g3. So I'm going to first play knight e4 so that way if bishop e3 the knight covers the square, but I actually want to play rook to g6, and if I'm able to go rook g6 check, that's a good time to take on c5 because it hits the queen and it's going to be a very nice discovered attack. Rook f1 didn't do anything, bro. Maybe he's trying to protect f2, but f2 is not what I'm after. All right, so let's continue with the attack. Rook to g6 check. If he moves the king, he's mated. He has to block with the bishop. So he blocks with the bishop. Now, before we continue with our attack, for example, that's a free pawn, by the way. Remember, pin pieces don't protect. Let's take on c5. That's a free pawn because the rook is on the same line as the queen. Like he could actually blunder his queen right now, to be honest, because this is called a discovered attack. Moving the pawn out the way, revealing the attack on the queen. Now, after he moves the queen, my plan from there is to take on h4, then take on g3, and then once the pawn takes, we take on g3, and then he could be getting checkmated. So he saw it, he took here. My knight is under attack, by the way. But what if I take on h4 now? After taking on h4, let's say he takes a free knight. Then I play knight takes g3. After knight takes g3, maybe he takes with check. We block the check. That's fine. But anytime he takes and I play queen takes, that's going to lead to a mate. So let's go with this idea. Let's take on h4. Remember, guys, pinned pieces don't protect. So even though it seems as if the bishop is able to take, the bishop is pinned and cannot take my queen. Rook to b1. Now he's just trying to run away with his king. We're still going to take on g3 though. And then after he takes back, I may play rook takes instead of queen takes because if queen takes king over, should be a bit harder for us to checkmate unless there's queen takes e3. If queen takes e3 happens, then it's going to be forced mate. Yeah, I think queen takes e3 and it's over. So he took, let's see. So check, king moves, check, king moves. Maybe we check again, the king runs here, but then pawn push is going to be checkmate. So check, let's say king moves, check, king move, check. If a king goes on the back rank, that's mate. And if the king goes to d3, it's a pawn mate. So rook takes g3 is actually leading to a checkmate. Queen takes followed by queen e3 was also working. But if you're able to make everything comes with a check, then it's basically hopeless because there's just nothing that the opponent could do. So the king goes to f1. We check on h1. We're forcing the king to d3. So basically, he's now trying to run away with his king. But now we're going to check him here. Checking here means if the king ever goes back, that's going to be a mate. And if the king ever goes here, it's going to be a mate. So queen h2 is basically GG's. This is forced mate, regardless of where he puts the king. He resigns. More Dutch defense against 900 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 900. Let's play some more Dutch defense. Another very interesting username. This guy's from Guyana. Okay, we're actually playing against a London system. This is the Dutch versus the London. We're still going to be playing knight to f6 here. Knight f3, now we play e6. Now, what I know about the London is the pawn is usually on c3, which means we're not going to be playing any bishop b4. So let's see what type of d4 we're playing against. The plan is simple. Knight e2, we still castle the king. And we're basically playing the Dutch versus the London. So pawn e3, bishop d3, castle. I'm going to play pawn b6, bishop b7, pawn d6, knight d7. So e6, we go b6. Very simple stuff. We're actually both playing for our setup. He's going to get his perfect London setup. I'm going to get my perfect Dutch setup. So clutch off the setups. Bishop d3, we go bishop b7. And then he castle, we go d6. Do we play d6? No, because we have to be careful because the bishop is on e7. And one thing I've learned is if I play d6 and there's knight g5, it's kind of very annoying to protect e6. I mean, I have to maybe play something like queen d7. So knight to e4, no. Yeah, I don't want to go knight e4 no though, but if knight e4 takes, that should be fine. So let's go knight e4 no. Knight e4 no, then d6. So that way knight to g5 is not possible. I was just really expecting this guy. Come on, bro. You have my name, bro. At least taking with the bishop would have been better because now you take with the knight. I'm not gonna take with the bishop, bro. I'm gonna take with the pawn. This is now just a fork. Okay, if he moves the bishop, we take the knight. If he moves the knight, we take the bishop. All right, so knight t5, we take the bishop. We're already enjoying our free piece 10 moves in the game. He decides to take with the queen, and now let's continue with the setup. Pawn d6 hits the knight. Once the knight move, knight d7. All right, knight g4, I wasn't expecting. Like, where's this knight even going? Can't go here, can't go here, 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 here. The knight can't go nowhere. The knight is actually trapped. With that being said, pawn to h5, just attack the trapped knight. Where's it gonna go? We're gonna be ahead by 2 pieces. 12 moves into the Dutch. Holy shoes. Yo, that's a nice move. If I take the knight, queen check. King over, queen takes. Drawn. I cannot take the knight. That's crazy. Let's play king to h8. And then after king to h8, there's also queen to g6. With queen g6, though, luckily, just luckily, I'm able to play queen to e8. Like the whole time I was like, knight can't go here, knight can't go here, but it can. I mean, not like he's gonna win, but I'm not trying to draw this game, you know? He found queen g6, knew he would have found it. And he's also threatening some forks here as well. Let's just play queen to e8, which means if he check, I take. If he trade queens, I'm happy. What is he gonna play though? Like, I think this is just winning. Eventually, I'm gonna take that knight though. I'm just not gonna take it just yet. So he trade the queen. We take with the rook. The knight is able to go to the f7 square. Now we have to play something like king to g8, but we're attacking the knight. The thing is though, the guy actually didn't lose the knight because now the knight is able to go back to g5, which is crazy, and he's attacking my unprotected pawn. Or did he lose something? Because here's now what I'm seeing. I was just about to say, let's just trade because we're ahead in material, but the bishop is the only piece that is guarding that knight. Since the bishop is the only piece that is guarding the knight, what happens if we play pawn to e5? That's a removing the guard tactic. If pawn takes, bishop takes, that's just a free knight. Now, there is this move knight e6, and I'm still going to take the bishop because after knight takes, he's okay, he found it, he found it. I'm still going to take the bishop though. We're still taking the bishop because two minor pieces are better than a rook. So after knight c7, I'm just going to develop my knight. And once he takes one of the rook, we take the knight, and we're still going to be ahead by many points. So he took, let's take, it's only 2 points actually. And it's funny because once he takes this pawn, it's only 1 point. But I have 3 minor pieces versus one of his rooks. So this just has to be good. Let's start with bishop to d6, open the file for the bishop, attacking this pawn on f4. He saw it, he guarded the pawn. If a knight was on h3, that would be mate, but that's kind of impossible to even attempt that right now. So let's just continue to activate our pieces. Rooks on the 7 is in heaven. We're attacking the unprotected pawn. I'm assuming he's going to attack my bishop or play b4. That's a nice move. I want to just get all my pieces just so active. Like, can I find a way to get my knight here? I just don't think it's possible. Let's just play a5 though, because now if he takes, I play knight takes and I'm active. Rook d1, very strong move, hits the bishop. Okay, we have to pull the bishop back. Let's just pull the bishop back. If rook d7, I go bishop a6, put my bishop on the same line as his rook. All of a sudden, this guy's just playing so strong. You know, pawn b5 is not possible. If he takes, I'm still going to take. But in positions like these, like you have three minor pieces versus the rook, it's just impossible for white to have a chance here. I just need to get my pieces coordinated in such a way. So rook to d5 is not necessarily putting too much pressure on the knight. He's attacking the unprotected pawn. Let's just actually here's what I'm gonna do. Let's take this pawn on h2. Now it seems as if I'm taking a pawn, he's taking a pawn, which is what he did. But little did he see, it was a discovered attack on his rook. My bishop was pointing towards his rook. Now it's just game over. Now I'm just ahead by two pieces. Once the rook takes, bishop c5, and there will also be no way for him to cover his f2 pawn. Come on, bro. You had to at least take back the bishop. He moves the rook. Now I move my bishop. Are you trying to get checkmated? He has to pull the rook to the back rank now. Otherwise, he's mated. So he did pull the rook to the back rank. And as we said, bishop c5. Now we have two pieces pointing towards his f2 pawn. The plan from here is to play bishop check, force the king to move. Okay, that's fine. So we play bishop check. King can't go here. King has to go here. And if I'm able to get my bishop to g2, that would be mate, but only if the rook was guarding it. So let's just pull the bishop back one square, only one square. And then I'm threatening the checkmate. He's not able to prevent mate in this position. Fortunately for me, I mean, he could give a little check and then I move, but yeah, he gave the little check. Now I move. Now I'm threatening two forms of checkmate, which means on the next move, it would nah. I was about to say it will be a checkmate, but he could have sacked the rook. He decides to pull the rook back though, which means that's just a checkmate. More Dutch defense against 1,000 level players. Stick around. The opponent is now 1,000. Let's play some more Dutch defense. On c4, we go knight f6. We know the setup that we're trying to go for. That's the important thing. We know the setup. So knight c3, we play e6. Bishop b4 would be ideal. Let's see if he's going to play a3 to prevent that. Remember, if the bishop is not able to go to b4, then the bishop goes to e7. Bishop g5 is usually one of those annoying moves, but there's many ways to deal with this bishop on g5. There's queen e8 to g6. There's knight e4 in the future. So we're not afraid of that. Pawn to g3 is a very nice move. Because usually when they decide to fianchetto, it's harder for us to fianchetto. But let's just get the king out the center of the board now. Bishop g2, okay, let's play d6. We're not able to fianchetto, but my plan from here is to, if I get my knight on the e4 square, then I should be able to fianchetto. But let's see, if knight f3, we go queen e8, or maybe knight d7 first. So he did play knight to f3, and now I'm going to play the move knight to d7 just to finish my development. If b6, he may have some nice discovered attacks. So let's just play... No, no, no. I was thinking about queen e8, but knight b5 is strong. So let's get rid of that knight first. It also doubles up his pawn, which means the moment the knight goes to e4, his pawn is going to be unprotected. But for now, the knight is pinned. So we're going to play queen e8 to get out of that pin, and then we play knight e4. All right, so rook e1 was played. Now we go knight e4, hit the bishop, hit the unprotected pawn. I'm expecting some queen c2 moves here. The funny thing is though, if I play pawn to b6, there's knight d2. Oh, but then I'm able to go bishop b7. And if he takes, I takes, and then I'm safe. So queen c2, we play b6. If knight d7, I go bishop b7. If knight takes, I take. Nah, that doesn't work. That does not work. Because the moment I play b6, if I take his knight, he takes my rook. All right, let's just play knight f6. Let's support the knight. Usually when I can't play b6, I just try to go bishop d7 followed by bishop to c6. And if our rook is on, let's say our rook is on d1, I could go bishop d7 to a4 and then skewer him. So let's see what he's going to play here. Knight d2, no. Oh my God, he puts the rook on d1. The queen and the rook is on the same line, guys. Let's just play bishop d7. He has to be very careful here. We're threatening this skewer. Will he find it? Will he find it? He did not find the skewer. Queen and rook is on the same line. Bishop to a4 hits the queen. Queen has to move. We grab the rook. And another idea that you guys want to keep in mind is usually when they play d5, we want to meet d5 with e5 at all times. So that way we get very good control over the center of the board. So we didn't fianchetto the light squared bishop this time around, but that light squared bishop gave us a rook or an exchange. So he moves the queen, we grab the rook, he takes back, and knight g4. If knight g4, it hits the f2 pawn twice, but he's just going to put the rook back to f1. So let's just play e5 here. All trades are welcome at this point, guys. All trades are welcome. All right, so he decided to pull the bishop all the way back to c1. Maybe he wants the knight on the g5 square instead, but if the knight goes there, I'm just going to take it. So let's just play queen to a4, hit the unprotected pawn, apply some pressure to his rook. The rook, the queen, however, rather, is the only piece that is guarding the rook, which means if I could play something like knight takes c3 and then the queen takes on c3, queen takes d1 is going to be a rook. So that's a nice idea. Okay, pawn a3 was played. So here's what I was saying, guys. Because the queen is the only piece that is guarding the rook, it means the queen is overworked guarding both the pawn and the rook at the same time. Which means now if I'm able to take on c3, which I am, the queen is not able to take the knight because he loses the rook. And I'm also attacking the rook. And I'm also threatening this fork. All right, rook to e1. Okay, now my knight is unprotected. I don't want a fork here because he's just going to take my knight. I mean, at least knight a2 hit the bishop. Let's try that. Let's try knight a2 hit the bishop. Hmm. Let's just put the knight back to e4. Knight g5 to e6 could be very annoying. I mean, eventually I could even play knight d2. And now that he plays knight d2, I'm just going to trade without even thinking about it because I'm the one who is ahead in material. And then he made a drawback mistake because the queen on d3 was covering c4, pulling the queen back to d2, left c4 unprotected, which means now we're taking on c4. We're now ahead by 4 points, guys. On to f4. What does that even do? Let's just play rook to e8, put our rook in the center of the board. It's very important that we play chess with all our pieces. Now if he takes on e5, we play rook takes e5, and then I'm going to have 3 pieces attacking d5. Bishop b2 was played instead. Now we take on f4 because our e-rook is now active. How is he going to take back? Maybe he's going to take with the pawn and then, oh, he took with the queen. This is helping us, bro. You're down so many points and you're trading queens. Nah, that's not how it works. All right, from here, it's just a matter of getting every piece active. I mean, rook to e3 is a nice move. I'm trying to play rook to e8 and then put both of my rooks on the file. I'm expecting bishop d4 hit the rook, but then that's actually a drawback mistake. I'm also expecting king f2 hit the rook, but knight g4 hits the king and guard the rook. So he did hit the rook with the bishop. We take yet another pawn, punishing another drawback mistake because the bishop moves from b2, where it was guarding the pawn, and move to d4. Pawn e4. Okay, let's actually take with the knight, to incentivize him to trade. And once he trades, I could take and then allow rook takes. But what if I play rook e8 first? No, he's not going to be able to play rook takes once I trade. And if he moves the bishop, then, I'm just going to take his rook for free. All right, king f2. Now we're just trading every piece off the board. I'm hitting the rook. I'm hitting the king. This is just completely over. So rook takes, we take. From here, the plan is just to queen the pawn, maybe sacrifice the rook for the bishop and win the game that way. But he resigns. More Dutch defense against 1100 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1100. More aggressive Dutch coming your way. So c4, we play knight f6, cover the light squares, pawn e6. Knight c3, we play pawn e6. And then the idea is to play bishop b4. I've seen players play a3. This is one of them. And if they play a3, you can't go bishop b4. So you have to put your bishop on e7. And then you're just going to get your king out the center of the board. So he's also fianchettoing the bishop, which is also something against me fianchettoing my bishop. But let's just get the king out the center of the board first. And then after bishop b7, here I'm actually going to play the move pawn to d6. So it's going to be harder for me to fianchetto my bishop. Knight f3, if I go, I'm thinking of playing bishop to d7 here actually. And usually what I do is I try to put my bishop on c6. But if bishop c6, there's pawn d5, takes. So instead, I'm actually going to try to play bishop. Nah, that's actually weird. How does this work? All right, let's actually go bishop c6. If pawn d5, I take, and then go back to d7. This is one of those weird ways where Like when you're playing the Dutch, like I recommend that you try to fianchetto your light squared bishop quickly. So that way you don't have to run into any issues in the future trying to get it fianchettoed. All right, so if knight d7, pawn d5, and my bishop is trapped, do not be falling for those ideas. There's knight e4 here, but then there's always going to be pawn d5. I'm going to expect that pawn d5 is going to come on the board. So let's just play b6 here, and then I'm going to try to play knight d7. If I pull my bishop back to b7 here, it's a very weird way to fianchetto. I think it cost me 2 extra move, but at least I was able to do it. Bishop f4, pull the bishop back. Oh, wait. There's actually a trick here. I want to tell you guys about a trick. There's actually knight g4, and because the bishop is unprotected, if I protect the bishop, he takes and then take on e6. And if I protect the pawn, he takes here. And if I take on g7, he takes on e6 first. Okay, but then I'm able to move the queen, and if he takes my rook, I play queen b7. But then he's able to go back, and his knight is not going to be trapped. So that's actually a line that you guys need to be aware of. If he finds knight g5, then it's going to be a very interesting position. All right, he didn't. He played queen c2. If I play knight d7, it's the same thing. So let's play h6 to not allow any knight. Oh my lord, there's still knight g5, right? Nah, I'm not sure. Anyways, knight e4 here. Let's go knight e4. So now I'm sure there's no knight g5. And I want to play knight d7 to f6 to improve my position. Maybe even to g4 and then attack on f2. But by then he's going to take something on e4. If he plays pawn e3, that would be funny because pawn to g5 would trap his bishop. All right, so knight back to d2. He's attacking my knight 1, 2, 3, 4 times. I'm only guarding it twice. So I have to play d5 here. And me playing d5, it kind of makes my bishop on b7 a bit worse, but I just had to guard my knight. If I had taken any one of these, he would have captured the bishop first. All right, so knight takes e4 was played. What piece do I even take back with? Let's take with the d pawn because it immediately attacks his d pawn. So if he's not careful, he could be losing a pawn. Okay, I was about to say if he plays e3, his bishop is trapped. Yeah, his bishop will never be trapped anymore because after g5 takes, there's always bishop e5. I like the idea of playing g5 though, so I'm still going to play knight d7. And then after g5, bishop e5, I'm going to take on e5, and his pawn is going to be very weak on e5. So that could have me, that pawn could be the pawn that helps me to win the game. So pawn b4, now we're going to trap the bishop. It's not really trap, but he has to put the bishop on e5, maybe now, or takes, then bishop e5. And then once I take, his pawn on e5 is just going to be too weak. Yup. Well, doing it now makes it worse, bro. You needed to take first because, all right, first of all, I'm definitely going to take that bishop. But once he takes back, if you notice, I have two pieces attacking his h pawn. So once I take his h pawn, if he takes back, my bishop takes. And then now the attacking plan is simple: attack on the g file. So move the king out the way, put the rook on the g file, maybe even put the queen on the g file, maybe find a way to put this rook on the g file. And then all the attack is going to be coming from here. So he didn't take back, he played c5 instead. Guess he wants to play c6, but should be able to just take on c3. If pawn c6, we take on f2. And now that he take back, I have a nice idea. My bishop is not active on this diagonal. So what am I going to do? I put it on this diagonal. And eventually, I can always put my bishop on d3, control some of the escaping squares that his king could run to. And I'm also ahead by a pawn, and I'm sure this is going to be a dead pawn. All right, so knight moves to b3. Eventually, the knight is going to be moving to d4 to attack this pawn. For now, let's play bishop to d3 to hit the queen. And I want to get my queen over to g6 because for one, it guards the pawn, and two, it attacks this pawn. And then once my rook gets to g8, then it's going to be a real attack coming his way. So he moves the queen, we play queen e8. If knight d4 hits the pawn, I play queen g6, guard the pawn, and I'm attacking this pawn. The best offense, well, the best defense is usually an offense. So queen to g6 is now the move. I like to just say offense is the best defense. The question is he going to protect the G pawn? Because maybe he's going to be like, okay, let's not protect the G pawn. Let him take on G3. Then we take on E6. But I may not rush to take on G3. Like I want to first get my rook on the G file, to be honest. All right, so queen to D2 was played. Same idea. If I take, he's just going to take. So let's not rush. Let's move our king out the way. King h8 is fine. King h7 is fine. I don't think it matters where I put the king here. But rook to g8 is the idea. Okay, king to h7. He's guarding the pawn now. Let's play rook to g8, attack the pawn. And I'm definitely expecting queen to f2 just to add as many defenders to the pawn as possible. But we already tell you what my plan is. I'm going to add as many attackers to the pawn as possible. And this is how I'm going to be attacking on the king side. So he guards the pawn. Now we play rook g7. What's the plan? Rook g8, tripling up on the g file. So maybe he's going to play rook g1 and then move the bishop so that way he has triple defense on the pawn, and that's what he's doing. Let's triple up on the pawn. He moves the bishop out of the way, okay? And all right, my bishop is under attack. If he takes pawn takes, and that pawn is not going to be as strong, but I like the idea of playing h5 here, then h4. If he takes, that pawn is hanging. Well, not really. The rook is not hanging because the rooks are going to be on connected. But there's also rook h7, h5, and then if he takes, there's rook takes. It's very tricky. Or there's queen h6, h5, and then if he takes, there's bishop takes at the queen. All right, knight back to d2. Now we play h4. Now we play h4. Or we takes, then h4. Nah, how does this work? I want to play h4. And if pawn takes, we play queen h6. And then the whole idea is to take on h4. My rooks are already cutting off his king. And then once my queen check his king on this file, then it should lead to some checkmates or at least some checkmating attacks. So we were, wait, nah, not knight f4, bro. Let's do some counting here. The knight was one of the defenders of g2. He now has one, two, three defenders. I have one, two, three, four attackers, which means once I take on g3, this is completely winning. Completely winning. If he moves the king, we take the queen. He takes the queen, and then I take back. Oh, wait, though. Well, rook takes makes it easy for me. Let's just take. If queen takes, we take. And yeah, we're just winning. Like, we're just going to be ahead by an entire rook. Queen takes. Let's grab the queen. We're ahead by a rook, which means we're welcoming all trades. If he takes, we take back. We're trying to get this bishop in the game as well. Yup, all the trades are happening now. Let's take. And if knight takes, I'm also able to just take here. But trying to set up checkmate though, like if I pull my rook back and then check here, but maybe he's going to be right in time to block with his knight. So let's not rush that. Let's take it the knight, force the knight to move. Once the knight moves, now I'm going to play rook e4. If he thinks he's winning a free pawn, he's actually not because the king can't move, which is why he played that move. But we're okay, let's just take on c5 and then take here. Now, this is just winning. I'm trying to find the quickest way to do it. But he also helped me by playing knight to h5 because that's just a checkmate. More Dutch defense against 1200 level players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1200. Let's continue to play some Dutch defense. On c4, we go knight f6. Remember, the plan is to control the light squares. Pawn e3, we play e6. So it's not going to be a lot of times where we see pawn e3. And I also want him to play knight c3. So if you delay putting his knight on c3, just use the time to develop your queenside pieces first. And then once the knight goes to c3, that's where you go bishop b4. And now that he plays knight to c3, that's when I go bishop to b4. And then I'm going to continue with the same idea. Pawn g3, we just go bishop b7. I don't usually see people fianchetto against this a lot, but it's definitely something that they could do. Let's just get the king out the center of the board. Queen c2 was played, okay. And now if I play pawn d6, I'm thinking knight g4, but I should be able to take. So it doesn't work just yet. So let's continue with pawn d6. If he castle, knight d7, knight g4 at that point should be good. So with that being said, let's just play queen e7. Like, one thing you guys need to keep in mind is the e6 pawn is usually a bit weak when it comes to a knight going to the g4 square. So let's not try to fall for anything. All right, so once they play h3, we know that we're giving up that bishop for the knight. I'm assuming he's going to take with the queen to not double up his pawns, and then I'm going to simply finish my development and then try to start some attack on his king. He took with the pawn, very unexpected. Let's go knight d7 here. I don't know why he would take with the pawn and he has the queen on c2. And then he plays bishop to b2. Like, where's this bishop even pointing? Your bishops are just pointing towards your own pawns, bro. All right, so from here, the kingside attack is going to be harder for us. I could try to prepare it slowly, But let's start by playing the move pawn c5. I don't include this move pawn c5 a lot, but it's definitely a move because we can also play rook to c8, take on d4, and then the c4 pawn becomes a target. So rook to d1 was played. Let's play rook to c8, just trying to get this rook in the game. I'm also putting my rook on the same line as his queen. Knight e4 is always going to come. There's just no way for him to prevent knight e4 now, so I'm not trying to rush it. To d2 makes it even easier for me to play knight e4. Like the guy's incentivizing me to play knight to e4 because now once I play knight e4, I gain tempo on his rook. Now the pawn on c4 is unprotected. I would love to take, but once he takes with the c pawn, it's going to automatically be guarded unless I'm able to play pawn d5 and apply immediate pressure to that pawn. And I think that should be winning me a pawn. So well, there's also bishop f1, so I need to be a bit careful. For example, if I take stakes pawn d5, let's do it. Take stakes pawn d5. If bishop f1 we takes, and if bishop takes bishop d5, and I'm winning the bishop. So just the whole fact that the rook is on the same line as the queen, that could help me to win material here. And it's funny how we're not attacking on the king side because he fianchetted the bishop. Like there are ways to do it. For example, rook f6, rook h6, g5, g4, and then get the queen to h5. But that usually just takes too much time. All right, rook to d4, which means now the pawns are just super weak. He just wanted to protect with his rook, but this is now just a simple removing the guard tactic. I attack the rook guards the pawn e5 attacks the rook, just removing the piece that guards the pawn. Now the rook has to move, we take the pawn, and we're just winning. So he pulls the rook back. Now we grab the free pawn. Wait, let's think about it. Grab the pawn, knight d2 hits the rook, and if I takes, he takes my bishop. I don't want to rush this because those pawns are doubled. Seems dead as well. So let's actually not rush it. Maybe I don't even need to take that pawn just yet. I'm actually going to play knight c5. I don't want to rush this. Bishop a6 is going to attack the pawn as well. Well, there's also an idea of playing pawn to f5 that I didn't mention. This is a good way to attack his king as well. And because all my pieces are on good position and his bishop is just really not doing anything, I may now play pawn to f5 with the whole idea of starting attacks on his king. All right, knight d2. It's okay to trade here. My bishop is guarded. Queen takes was played. There's now some attack on my d6 pawn, but let's just first trade the bishops first and then play rook to d8. And now my pawn is safe. There's queen d5 check, but I could also play queen f7. Like, I'm still going to win this pawn on c4. Once I don't take his queen and allow him to undouble his pawns are just going to be too weak. And the end game here is just going to be too good for black. So what I'm not going to do is take this pawn. What I am going to do is move my knight out the way and then use my rook to take on c4. There's also a very nice idea of me playing pawn e4, planting my knight on the d3 square, and it's on a light square and he has a dark squared bishop. So that would also be very strong. I think I'm going to go with that idea, especially now that he's trying to double up on the file. Perfect time to play e4 because the moment he double up on the file, we hit him with knight d3. Both of his rooks aren't doing anything, and he's now losing this pawn. So if you guys notice, I didn't really rush to win the pawn. I still win the pawn eventually. His bishop on b2 is just a very bad piece. Pawn to f3 doesn't do much. We just take the pawn. If he takes, we take back, and any rook check, we just move the king. So this is just good for black. So check. The question is where to put the king. I'm leaning towards e7 just to protect these squares, and I may also play rook to f8 to just trade because I'm ahead in material. Oh, now I'm ahead in a lot of material because the guy just played rook f4. Like my knight covers that square, bro. So let's just take with check. Poor guy, he didn't see that. He didn't see that. So he took. Let's start getting the king active. We're in the end game. King activity is crucial. He's activating his king as well. Let's just play d5, protecting everything. I feel as if I'm ahead by 2 pieces though, because his dark squared bishop is just so bad. All right, so he's also activating his king. I'm going to try to activate my rook on this side to try to start attacking his pawns. In some cases, I could even start an attack on his king, but we're in the end game. We know that the whole idea is to attack the pawns. All right, rook to c2. Still don't know what that does. Let's play rook to f5. I'm trying to play h5, hit the king, g5, open some lines for my rook. Pulling the bishop back to c1 still doesn't help. Bishop is still a bad piece. h5 hits the king. Maybe he puts the king here, but if he pulls the king back, then I'll go here. If he puts the king on h4, well, I was going to play king f6, g5, but now I'm just going to play g5 in one move. Because once you have the rooks, it's very important that you do pawn trades to open lines. It's also important that you know that the winning side in the end game don't necessarily want to be trading the pawn. So if I trade every single pawn off the board now, game could actually be a draw. Pawn h4, let's actually take on. Do we even take? Let's just push. Now his bishop is really bad. Can't be activated over here. If he push, he loses this pawn, which means I now have a very simple plan. Walk my king into his position and then start capturing his pawn. Very simple plan. King over, king over, king up, king up, king up. So let's just start walking the king into his position. The best he could do to activate the bishop is push. All right, rook to d4 is even better for me because now I'm trading pieces off the board and I'm still going to be walking my king into his position. Okay, so he took. Let's go king up. I have two passed pawns. I have the most active king that you've seen, and I'm gonna play king d3, roll my pawn up the board, and he's likely gonna resign. He's trying to activate the bishop now, but that's just too late. Pawns are gonna be rolling up the board now. Let's up back to a1. Now we roll the pawn up the board. Yeah, this bishop was it just didn't do anything. It would have been best for him to try to get his bishop on g5 early on in the game at least. And he resigns. More Dutch defense against 1,300 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,300. Let's play some more Dutch defense. Knight f3, we're seeing now. Let's just go knight f6. Maybe he's going to play. Okay, and we're also seeing knight c3. Let's play e6. He's basically playing without playing pawn c4, which is kind of weird. But then he plays a3, which is still preventing us from playing bishop e4. We're still going to be playing moves like bishop e7 and castle. Remember, if you're not able to go bishop b4, just put your bishop on e7 and castle it. It's not a huge deal. Pawn to h4. Okay. Let's get the king out the center of the board first. Bishop to g5. We know how to deal with this. For now, let's just finish with our development. Pawn b6, bishop b7, pawn d6, knight d7. Queen to d3. Most likely he's trying to castle on the queen side here. Like that's what I'm seeing. There's bishop to a6, which hits the queen, by the way, but not seeing exactly what that gets me. So let's just put the bishop on b7 and then just continue with the plan. So we're seeing another queenside castling, and knight g4 is just nice though, but let's just continue with the plan first. I don't want to rush anything. Let's go d6, knight d7, and then maybe I'm just gonna plant the knight on the e4 square. Pawn to h5. Okay, maybe he wants to play pawn to h6 and then weaken my dark squares. So, well, and then if I play h6, I don't think, let's just play knight e7. I don't think it's going to affect me too much because I'm also trying to castle on the queen side. So if he plays h6, I play g6. Eventually, I'm still going to play knight e4. But then he decides to play e3. Now, if I play knight e4, yeah, let's go knight e4. I'm threatening f2, which is a fork. The knight belongs on the e4 square in these lines. If he takes, we're just going to take back and I'm chill. And if he takes with the knight, pawn takes, and that's a fork. So I like my position right now. Oh, wow. Guy's 1,300, by the way. Maybe he thinks I was going to play bishop takes. But that's a fart, bro. Like, I thought queen c4 was working, and if I take his knight, he takes with check, and I move the king, he takes. But for one, I take the knight, he takes, I could block with the bishop. But two, I could also play d5. So he took on e7 first. Let's take back on e7, which makes it even easier for me because queen c4 or b3 doesn't even attack e6 anymore. So this is now just completely won. He moves the queen. We grab the knight. The funny thing is, he's not able to take back the pawn because that's going to be a fork. And if he takes on c7, come on, bro. That's a fork, bro. That's over. That's GG's. Like, I'm just going to be playing with an extra rook here. All right, so he develops his bishop. Now we're just going to finish him off. I'm going to choose to take 8 rook. I mean, he's still going to take back anyways, but I was just trying to grab this pawn on f2. I'm now ahead by 6 points. I'm going to swing this rook over in the game, double up on the f file, queen to g5, attacking e3. Yeah, so pawn h6, as we said, once we see h6, we play g6. If he sacked the bishop and I take and then he play h7, I have king h8. Now that he played d5, he wants to play some. I think he may even want to sack the bishop at this point. But what if I play rook f8? He sacked the bishop. I check first, trade the rooks off the board, then take the bishop. Rook f8, he takes on e6. and then I play knight e5. Let's just get all the pieces in the game. It's always going to be good to play with all the pieces. So pawn b4, okay. And let's just get, wait, I mean, I could take here, but then there's always queen take. So let's play knight e5, hit the bishop. Since we're trying to trade, we're also protecting c7. Not sure why he played b4 just now, but I'm just trying to get rid of every piece off the board. Like the moment you're ahead in material, we know that we're going to start trading. Okay, he sacked the bishop. The point is, though, I'm not, bro, my knight guards the square. Like, this is just bad in all scenarios. But let's get rooks off the board first. Let's get the rooks off the board first. Now the rooks are off the board. There's so many different ways in which I could take the bishop, but let's just choose to take with the knight. If he takes on e6, there's queen f6. We get the queens off the board, and that's gonna be GG's. All right, queen c6. Um, Nothing too scary. Let's just take. If he takes, if he checks, we're able to block the check, hit the queen. If he takes with the queen, we block the check, hit the queen again. And what I want him to do is put his queen on the same diagonal as his king. So I could just trade the queens off the board and force him to resign. Okay, now he's trading. It's just GG's. All right, let's just take the queen. We're just ahead two pieces and the opponent resigns. But more Dutch defense against 1,400 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,400. Let's play some more Dutch defense. Immediate knight c3. Let's go knight to f6. This looks like it's some Joe Barber type of business. Yeah, but Joe Barber shouldn't be working against the Dutch. So let's just continue with the plan of pawn to e6. Any knight b5 move that he plays, we should be able to play pawn to d6. And then, okay, we're going to be chasing away his knight. Now he plays f3 because he wants to play e4. But the initial idea was always to play bishop b4. And we're going to be giving up that bishop for the knight. Queen to d2, very interesting move. Maybe he's planning on castling on the queen side. Let's get working out the center of the board first. Let's try to see what he's really trying to do. Pawn a3 hits the bishop. No brainer. Let's just take. Now, after queen takes, there's knight d5. You know, it's a fork, but he's able to play queen to d2. And then if I takes, queen takes, and I don't really get much from that. Also, he has two pieces attacking c7. So let's just play pawn to d6 and continue with the regular Dutch plan, you know, guarding c7, knight d7, pawn b6, bishop to b7, but he castles on the queen side. He castles on the queen side. It's a different plan now. It's a different plan. Now we have to attack him on the queen side. Okay, let's start with knight to d7. Let's finish our development, but I'm sure it's going to be a different plan of us attacking on the queen side. Pawn e3, there's still knight d5, but once he moves the queen, the bishop is fine. So let's continue with our development. Still pawn b6, bishop b7. My pawn on e6 is unprotected. So if bishop c4, I'm going to play queen e7 to guard it. So bishop c4 was played. Queen to e7 protects the pawn. One thing I'm noticing now, though, is moving my queen to e7, my c pawn is now unprotected, and the queen was on the same line as the pawn. So maybe he could have moved the bishop. But then I was actually planning on sacking this pawn to open the c file on his queen. So knight e2, let's play bishop to b7. And now I have some plans of playing c5. This c5 move is also very important, depending on the position, though, because if c5 and he takes, then a bishop going to d6 could be very catastrophic. So maybe not now. I'm thinking of a6, b5 to hit the bishop. I'm also thinking of e5 to hit the bishop. But we're not going to be rushing the attack. Bishop to g5. Fair enough. He's pinning the knight. Let's just play h6. Put the question to that bishop. The good thing is, his bishop is no longer on this diagonal, which means pawn c5 is now an idea. But, you know, I'd like to get my rook on the c file before playing pawn c5. He gave up his bishop for a knight. Let's take with the knight. Usually we would take with the rook if his king was castled over there, but we're not going to be doing that now. Knight f4 is a really nice move because now there's two attackers on my pawn and I only have one defender, and he's also threatening a 4. I didn't see that 4. All right, let's play d5. Hit the bishop. I have a little plan. d5 hits the bishop. The fork shouldn't work just yet. If he plays knight g6, there's queen f7. And if he takes my rook, I take his bishop. And then his knight is going to be trapped. So the fork shouldn't work just yet. He went for the fork. Queen f7 is what we're going to play to hit the knight. I mean, he has the last chance to back out of it. Like, I don't think he should go for the fork. I think he should try to play something like knight e5, centralize the knight. I move my queen. He move his bishop. And then from here, it's just chess. He took the rook though. Watch this. We don't take back the knight. We take bishop. Remember, two minor pieces are better than a rook. So if I'm able to take the knight on the next move, black is actually better in this position. So I didn't see the fork, but the fork just didn't work. Queen takes c4 was played. Let's just take the knight. And the position is equal in terms of material. But in terms of like piece activity, I like my minor pieces compared to his rooks. Now, my rook isn't really doing much, but he decided to give me the rook. Like, we know about drawback, guys. What was the pawn doing on g2? What is the pawn no longer doing on g2? The pawn was guarding the f3 pawn. Moving into g4 no longer guards the f3 pawn, which means taking on f3 is now just a fork. So at first, black was slightly better, but now black is completely winning. Okay, he took. We're not in any rush. Let's just take back. The rooks are still forked. We're trying to trade queens off the board, so let him come with the trade. Like, we would like to trade here. All right, so he took. Let's actually take with the king because king activity is important in the endgame. On the next move, we're going to be taking one of the rooks. So he saves this rook. We take this rook. My f5 pawn is now under attack. So king to e6 guards the pawn. And from here, it's just a matter of advancing my pawn majority up the board. So how I'm going to win this game is I have two pawns here. He has one pawn here. So once I move these pawns up the board, I'm going to be able to create a pass pawn. So h3, we play g5, then h5, then g4. And if he takes, that's two connected pass pawns marching up the board. Rook f2, we play h5. D4, now we play G4, and that's how we're going to be creating the pass pawn. That's just a check. Let's just move the king forward. Remember that king activity is crucial in the endgame. And if he takes this way, we take this way. Yeah, now we have two pass pawns. Like if we had taken this way, we would have only had one. But with two pass pawns, it's now just game over. And I hope you guys know that once we have two pawns on the sixth, or in this case in the third, it's just stronger than the rook. So he moves the rook. Pass pawns must be pushed. Let's continue to roll the pawns up the board. If he push this, I'm just going to take. He guards the pawn. Let's continue to roll the pawns up the board. King moves. Now, if I push the pawn to h3, I'm going to be losing this pawn. So I'm going to first play knight e4 guarding this pawn. And then we play pawn to h3. And the moment both of the pawns are on the third, it's going to be stronger than the rook. There's also a rook to f2, which just trades the rooks off the board. And then once we trade the rooks off the board, it's over. But he decides to resign. But more Dutch defense against 1,500 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1,500. Let's play some more Dutch defense. So, okay, the natural moves are coming. D4, C4, knight C3. That was the instruction. Well, he chose to play knight f3. It shouldn't matter though. We're still gonna play the move pawn to e6. And usually, if they delay putting their knight on c3, then we just first finish the development over this side first. And if they really don't want to allow bishop b4, they usually play a3. But knight c3 was played. Let's just play bishop b4, and everything is just transposing here. Bishop to g5 is one of the main moves that you guys are gonna see. Pawn to e3 will make black's life way, way easier, but nobody's going to want to play e3 and block their bishop in. So you're more than likely always going to see this move. So we did see bishop to g5. Let's get the king out the center of the board. And after pawn to e3, we play pawn b6. Plan is to fianchetto the bishop, put the knight on d7, and start our attack. So the attack is going to be coming in from the center towards the king side there. And, if you guys watch up to this point, you should know the types of moves that is coming. Pawn g3 is interesting. That's an interesting choice. We're still going to be fianchettoing the bishop, but he's basically challenging our fianchettoed bishop. All right, now I'm going to play pawn to d6. Let's just finish with our development. And the king is now castled. Let's go knight d7. All our pieces are now developed. And there's now some plans of playing h6 now. It's usually a bit harder to attack someone's king if the bishop is fianchetted. Anytime they attack our bishop, we're going to take the knight. And because we're trying to get out of this pin, queen to e8 is also an important move. Now, usually they give up the bishop for the knight here, because if he allows me to play knight e4, hits the unprotected pawn, hit the bishop, he could be losing the pawn or the bishop or both. So this is where he just needs to take on f6. Yeah, rook e1 is bad, bro. That's bad, bro. 94. I'm hitting the bishop, I'm hitting the unprotected pawn, but my master plan here is to actually trap this bishop. The bishop actually has nowhere to go. So bishop to g5, I say this a lot, it's usually an annoying type of move, but if you know exactly how to deal with it, move the queen out of the pin, play knight e4, play queen g6 or queen h5, then you should be able to win some nice games. And please remember to like this video, guys. Those likes goes a far way. And if you also want to play against me, just comment your username with the ELO that you're trying to represent. All right, so queen to d3, he guarded the pawn, but we're winning the bishop. And we're going to be winning the bishop by playing pawn h6, bishop back to, well, this square, and then we play pawn to g5. So let's play h6 here. The thing is, after bishop f4, I'm wondering if it is best for us to play pawn g5 or pawn e5. Like, both of them win the bishop, but what's the better way to win the bishop? That's what I'm trying to figure out. He chose to pull the bishop back to h4, which means we're definitely going to be playing pawn to g5. I had a student who asked, when is it a good time to push pawns on the side that our king is on, or when is it safe to push pawns on the side that our king is on? How do we know when to push pawns on the side that our king is on? You just need to evaluate the opponent's pieces or the possibility of the opponent's pieces attacking your king. All right, knight back to d2 was played. And once I take his bishop, I'm assuming he's going to try to win a pawn here. But because the bishop is trapped, I'm in no rush to take that bishop. So I'm just going to not lose my pawn. He's attacking my knight how many times? One, two, three times. I'm guarding it one, two times. So I just need to add one more defense. So knight f6, if he takes, I take. We trade the pieces off the board. And once we take the bishop, I'm just chilling. So we see pawn to f3. Now that pawn to f3 is played, I'm now free to move my knight. So we take on d2, and then he's not going to take. And now the bishop is now just dead. I definitely don't need to be in a rush to take the bishop, but I'm not seeing anything else that is there to do, and it's a bishop. So once he takes, now I could go queen h5, hit the pawn, apply more pressure to f3. I could move my king to h8, then play rook g8, and then put my rook on this open file. He plays pawn to e4 though, which means he's basically trying to open the line here for his queen. Should I be afraid of that? I do not think so. Because once the queen goes to h6, I should be able to play queen h5. And my goal is to trade some pieces off the board anyways. So, well, if I takes, that's something. I could takes, queen takes, then play queen h5. And then after the trade, yeah, let's do that. Let's take. Oh, he didn't take on h6. I don't mind if he take on h6. Let's take on g6 as well, because I kind of want him to take on h6 so that way we trade. He didn't, so he basically forced me to defend h6. But it's not necessarily just a defensive move, as you guys could see. I'm also attacking this unprotected pawn on g3, and eventually I want to move my king out the way, get the rook on the g file, and attack this way. Rook to e3 guards the pawn, but this move knight to g4 attacks the rook, and it also opens the line for my f rook. So if he's not careful where he's putting his rook, my rook could get to his 7th rank, and then I could swing my rook over to f8, and then every single piece that I have is going to be active, and I'm ahead by a piece. So he just pulls the rook back. Let's hit him with rook to f2 now, and based on where he puts the queen, I'm also thinking of sacrificing my rook, bro. Like, yeah, this is, wait, or maybe I should just play queen to h5. All right, rook to e2, not bad. Let's get the rest of the pieces in the game. So let's go rook to f8. But queen to h5 seems to be forced mate, to be honest. Unless he sack his queen. Rook f1, fair enough. What if, no, no. I was about to say, what if we ignore that? Play queen h5. If he takes, we check. King over, we takes. But then after queen takes, I'm losing. So how does this work? Okay, now I know. We take on, how does this work? What I'm seeing is this bishop is overworked, guarding both the rook and the pawn on e4. So we could take on f1, force the bishop to move, then take on e4. Yeah, let's do that. Let's take on f1 with check, force the bishop to move, then we take on e4. That's another pawn. We're now ahead by 4 points. Queen h5 to h1 is also now an idea. So he puts the bishop back to g2, and because we're ahead in material, it's now a no-brainer that it's okay to trade. King takes was played, and no. Nah, maybe not now. Because if I go here, he just goes back with the king. Ah, we go here. Going back with the king is actually force mate. And queen h2 is force mate. So this is now GG's. Like, if he goes back with the king, try to ensure that you know the move. that black is going to play in that position. He goes back with the king. How does black end this game? Very simple. To find forcing moves, we look on moves on the opponent's half of the board. These are the checks, the captures, and the threats. Rook to f1 check, forcing move. If king g2, that's mate. And if the king takes the rook, queen to h1 is still a checkmate. Rook to f1, very nice sacrifice. The king now has to take our move. Anything that he plays, I could basically pre-move queen h1 because that's just a checkmate. More Dutch defense against 1600 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1600, and I'm going to be showing you guys some more Dutch defense. Pawn c4, we play pawn e6, and the whole idea of this line is to have very good central control and control over the e4 square as well. Now, you could choose to play knight f6 first. You could also choose to play bishop to b4 first. It's just important that you know exactly what you're doing with your kingside pieces. So bishop g5, let's go bishop g4. The whole idea is to get rid of this knight because we're trying to control the light squares in the center. So we're definitely going to be giving up this knight for the bishop. And usually we want to jump this bishop on e4. But with a bishop on g5, we're definitely going to have to play some h6 in the future. So knight to f3 was played. And there's pawn to d6, and if check, we should be able to block with the knight, but we don't want to be forced to do all of that, to be honest. So let's just get the king out the center of the board. And I have an idea of playing pawn d6, knight d7, so that way when I play h6, I'm able to take back with the knight and eventually put the knight on e4. Pawn to e3, now I'm going to play pawn to d6. So knight d7, pawn b6, bishop b7. That's just the orientation of the pieces. You know, it's just the entire setup that we're going to be using. Bishop d3. Now we go knight d7, which means h6 is now a possibility, and b6 followed by bishop b7 are also possibilities. So the opponent decided to castle. Let's just finish our development first. Basically, I'm waiting on them to play a3, then I give up my bishop. I don't necessarily want to just give up the bishop without them playing a3, but taking on c3 is usually good. Pawn h3, I'm not expecting. Let's go bishop to b7. Now, we have very good control over the light squares in the center so far. Let's see what white plays here. There's also some queen e8 to h5 ideas, but I'm very likely going to play something like h6 next move, or just move my queen and play knight e4. All right, so rook to c1. Now I'm going to play queen to e8 actually. And pawn to e5 followed by pawn to e4 is an idea in the Dutch, but we have to be careful when it comes to playing e5. Do not blunder your f5 pawn because it's usually only guarded by your e pawn. All right, queen to e2 was played, and e4 may be an idea further down in the line. So let's use the time now to get rid of that knight. Remember the bishop on b4? Our whole entire game plan is going to be to get rid of that knight. Now, I'm trying to make it a case where this bishop is at least misplaced, but there's this queen h5 move that I'm going to play next, and I basically don't have to play h6 in order for him to give up his bishop for my knight once I play queen to h5 because his knight on f3 is the only defender of this bishop on g5, which means I'm currently threatening or removing the guard tactic. You know, I'm just going to get rid of the knight, win the free bishop. Unless he pulls the bishop back to f5, but this is where our attack comes in with, you know, there's some rook f6, rook h6, rook f6, rook g6, there's king g8, push the pawn to g5, pawn g4, and we're going to be using the time to attack their king. So was expecting bishop takes f6. Let's just take with the knight. Eventually, the knight is going to the e4 square. It was actually very strong to take with the rook there, and then maybe play rook g6, then knight f6. That would be a nice idea. All right, so rook to e1 was played. You know, he's basically protecting the queen so that way he's able to pull the knight back to d2. Because we're trying to attacking, we're definitely not trying to trade the knights off the board. But now I'm going to go with this move, knight e4, hits the rook. If bishop takes, pawn takes is also strong, but it will block the diagonal for our bishop. Now, if I takes, knight takes, rook takes, he's trading. If I takes, he goes knight back, and then I could start attacking him on the king side. So I'm actually going to take with the pawn here, just so that way I'm not forced to trade. Again, definitely blocks my bishop, but because I'm trying to attacking, I'm not necessarily trying to trade. So if knight d2, we go queen h4, and then we're going to start swinging the rooks over on the opponent's king side. Knight h2, I wasn't expecting. The knight could also move to g4. I mean, the queen could also move to g4 as well. So for now, I'm going to play the move queen to a5 to attack this unprotected pawn. And I'm just trying to get my rooks on the f file first, so that way it's easier for my rook to get to the g file. And then I may swing the queen back over to g5 eventually. All right, so pawn a3. Now let's continue, or not just continue, let's actually start our attacking plan. Rook to f8 will have all the pieces in the game. We're not afraid of knight to g4 due to rook g6. Yeah, knight g4 we're not afraid of. We're just going to play rook g6 here and swing the other rook over in the game. Pawn h5 eventually will attack the knight. You know, there's also some queen to g5, and then if the knight moves, he's going to get checkmated on g2. So that knight g4 move was just wasting time. Okay, rook f1, very, very, very likely chance that he's going to push f3. But pushing f3, no, is not good because I'm just going to take. So this is where he's going to be in real trouble now once I play queen g5, because his knight is now pinned to a checkmate. So we're trying to force him to defend against this, you know, because h5 is coming next. So maybe he has to play something like pawn to g3 now, which will weaken this light square on f3. So there's not going to be any possibilities of playing pawn to f3. And then I'm going to probably go rook to f8, rook to f3. And even if a knight attacks my rook, I may sacrifice it. So the whole idea of the Dutch defense, you know, get controls over the light squares first in the center, then start your attack on the opponent's king on the king side. All right, so pawn to g3 was played, which means now if I play h5, the knight goes to h2. I mean, there's pawn to h4, trying to apply some pressure, but eventually he's going to just push the pawn to g4. Let's focus on bringing more pieces in the game first. So knight to h2. Now it's going to get very interesting. It's going to get interesting now. I'm seeing some checkmating ideas. He pulls the knight back. First thing I'm going to do is attack his h6 pawn. Wait, I'm thinking of rook to f3. Rook f3 takes, queen takes. Let's attack his h3 pawn first. If king g2, that's when I may go rook f3, because knight takes wouldn't even be an option. Queen g4 is a very strong move. Like, we don't want to trade the queens. I could take pawn takes, and my bishop, like, if I don't get this rook f3 idea, then my bishop is going to be bad. So here's what I'm going to do. Let's just put the queen on e7 as a waiting move and try to play rook to f3, sacrifice the exchange, and then eventually I'm going to try to play rook to g6, or I may play rook to f5 and then rook to g5 and hit the queen. Pawn b4, okay, fair enough. Maybe he's trying to play c5 in the future. Let's actually play this risky move, rook to f3. We're sacrificing the exchange, but it's the only way for me to include my bishop in the game. So once he plays knight takes and I play pawn takes, g2 is going to be weak, and I'm going to have some plans of playing rook to g6 hits the queen. I'm going to try to break through on the h3 square. So knight takes, we play pawn takes. The thing is about his position, though, he doesn't really have time on the clock either. So yeah, he's going to be losing regardless. His queen is actually playing a very good defensive role. Pawn to c5. We don't want him to play pawn to c6 for sure. Let's play rook to g6 first and attack the queen. Once the queen move, well, oh, come on, bro. He look at this. The rook is on the same line as the king. He puts the queen on h4. That's a queen, bro. It's over. This is GG's. That's crazy. And the opponent resigns. More Dutch defense against 1,700 players. Stick around. Our opponent is now 1,700. Let's play some more Dutch defense. Pawn c4. Let's go with knight f6. Control e4. Knight c3. We go e6. The plan is to play bishop b4. If people play a3 against you, then now you just have to put the bishop on e7 and just castle. So it's not a huge deal. So let's just play bishop e7. And after bishop g5, we're just going to castle. So we're still going to be using the same plan. Knight f3, we're still going to be playing pawn b6. The bishop is still going to b7. And we still want to play d6 followed by knight d7. So once you know and understand this setup, then you should be good. Pawn e3, let's fianchet to the bishop. Bishop d3. Now I'm going to play the move pawn to d6. All I'm trying to do now is finish my development. I'm not thinking about any attacks. I'm not worried about any attacks. Like, I have a lot of students, like, they break a lot of opening principles. And when I ask them why they make the move, they're always telling me about some attack that they're trying to prevent the opponent from doing, or some attack that they're doing. But none of that works in the opening stage of the game. If you're in the opening, do what people do in the opening and just develop. All right, so his king is castled. Now we play knight f6, and I have a plan of playing queen e8 to h5 here. So rook to e1 was played. I'm wondering if he wants to play this move pawn e4. Right now I have three good defenders on the e4 square, so it's going to be a bit tricky for him to play e4. Let's continue with our plan. Queen to e8. Queen is heading over to h5. And there's the 1600 game. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I think after bishop takes f6, rook takes f6 is it's a more aggressive, faster attack. Like, if I could get the rook on h6 or g6, then play knight f6, I think that would be good. But because he now has this knight on c3, and I haven't managed to get rid of my bishop, he's really considering pawn to e4 sometime now or in the future. Immediate bishop takes f6. All right, let's think about this. If rook takes f6 right now, pawn e4 is strong. If knight takes f6, pawn e4 shouldn't work. So let's play knight takes f6 and maybe put the knight on e4, then go for this attack. Queen c2 could be, queen c2, I should be able to expose this king. So knight d2 could be an idea. All right, so immediate pawn e4. I have one, two, three. He has one, two, three. So that's not bad. Definitely gonna take. If they manage to play e4, still take because it opens the line for your rook. Now, if knight takes, I takes, bishop takes, rook takes, and then e6 is actually weak in this position. So what I'm gonna do here, wait, it's actually tricky. How does this work? All right, I'm trying to keep some pieces on the board for the attack, so I'm actually thinking of playing knight h5 to f4. If knight h5, I'm wondering if he's able to play knight g5. At that point, I have knight f4. If knight takes, I takes, rook takes, I could take on f3 and give him some bad pawn structure. So let's go with that idea. Oh, but knight to g5 also attacks h7. Like, I just didn't want to play any prophylactic h6 move. But let's see. It's possibly going to be a very weird game then. Because if he plays knight h5, I don't even think bishop takes makes sense right now. But usually we don't use this bishop in the attack, so I may just take first, then play knight f5. But once he checks, queen h5 is going to be an issue, so likely not going to do that. All right, knight to g5 was played. That's a very nice move. Thinking about taking on f3, knight takes f3, then play knight f5. That could be the move if I don't want to lose the pawn. But let's think about it first. Knight f4. What if we play knight f4, bishop takes check, king over? Question is, how dangerous is this for us? I think it's dangerous, actually. Let's take on f3. Seems like a dangerous move to me. If he takes now, then king over, and black is actually winning. So I think he's going to have to play knight takes. Now we play knight f4, hit the bishop, guard the pawn. We're not losing any material. Bishop e4 is a very strong move here. And I don't think I'm able to play d5 take. Well, yeah, I should be able to play d5. If bishop e4, I'm going to play d5. Chase away the bishop. Um, the rook is on the same line as my queen, though, so we still have to be very careful. I'm thinking about some bishop to h5 ideas eventually to continue with my attack on the king side, but he decides to pull the bishop all the way back to f1, which means he's definitely trying to play pawn to g3 to chase away my knight. And if pawn to g3, he doesn't want me to be able to check here. So what if I play queen h5, pawn g3, check, bishop takes, and then rook takes? Yeah, that's going to be nice for him. With that being said, I like the idea of just playing rook to f6, pawn to g3, rook to g6. Let's do that. Rook f6. It also guards e6. That's like the main idea, but I'm just trying to make it hard for him to chase away my knight. But I think pawn g3, rook g3, king h1 should be fine enough for him. Usually in the Dutch, you would like to have this light squared bishop. Pawn b4. Maybe it's not time. Maybe it's not time to do that. Eventually, G3 is gonna come. Like, I know G3 is gonna come. I'm wondering, do I play Queen H5 or do I play Queen G6? The plan is to play Knight H3. Queen G6, there's Pawn G3, and then at that point I could swing my rook over in the game. And if Knight H4, We play queen to g5, knight back to f3, then queen g4, check on h3 eventually. There's immediate queen h5, but let's go with queen g3. We're putting the queen on the same line as the opponent's rook, which as the opponent's king, which means knight h3 is a deadly threat. So there's pawn g3 and knight h4. These are the two ways that I'm seeing to defend against this. So pawn g3 was played. It's a good move because now I'm not able to play knight h3. I want to just swing my rook in the game, but I don't know. I don't want knight to. Okay, I'm just gonna do it because if I swing my rook in the game, for one, he's not able to take now. If he plays knight h4, I just play queen h6, and he's still not gonna be able to take my knight because he loses his knight. So I'm just trying to ensure that all my pieces are active, especially since this knight is a bit wobbly now. So I'm thinking about some knight h3 followed by rook takes f3. Just need to watch over my e6 pawn. All right, so he plays rook takes e3. He clearly sees the idea of me trying to play knight h3. Pawn e5 will not work. I'm trying to give this bishop a role. Actually, I'm not really seeing the role for that bishop just yet. There's queen h5. I like queen h5. Queen h5, he's just gonna take though. If queen h5 and he takes, I check, blocks with the knight, and then I take on f4. So queen h5, he takes, I check. What if he moves the king? I don't think queen h5 should work right now. Maybe queen g4. Same idea. Queen g4, there's knight h4. Then I check. Yeah, let's go with queen g4. Because I'm still trying to check on h3. If I check on h3, the knight could be hanging, f2 could be hanging. Wouldn't be surprised if he just plays something like king h1 now. But if king h1, I still go to h3. That's the whole idea. To c1, rook c1, we check. Bishop takes, queen takes. And then the idea is to play rook h6. So let's do that. Check. I mean, king g2. I don't think he's going to play king g2. He's going to take. He's definitely going to give up the bishop for the knight. There's knight to g5 next, which hits the queen. I'm trying to figure out is there some queen sack ideas, but there won't be any queen sack ideas. If knight g5, there's queen f5, and then I'm targeting f2 and the knight. But I think if he plays a weird move and allow rook h6 now, he could be in trouble because there's plans of sacrificing my rook and then taking on h2. And the guy also has less than 2 minutes on the clock. So that's also another good sign. All right, so rook to c3 was played. He's trying to keep this knight guarded as best as he can. I need to give this bishop some work. So let's go with rook h6, hit the pawn, thinking about some sacrificial ideas, but I'm not seeing it working right now. I'm just trying to give this bishop some work. So maybe bishop f6, e5. Maybe I could play bishop g5, and then if the knight takes, I take on f2. That's definitely an idea. Queen f1 though. Queen f1 is very strong. Queen f1, I takes, king takes. Hmm. All right, we're not ready for any queen trades. Let's go queen g5, apply some pressure to the knight. Maybe he's gonna play queen g2 to ensure that his king is very safe. I want to go bishop g5 or bishop f6 and c5. Just want to give this bishop some work because usually this bishop is exchanged long time for the knight, but he played a3, which was nice. So queen g2, good defensive score for the queen. E5, not seeing e5 working as yet. So let's focus on the job of this bishop right now. So I'm currently attacking the pawn on d4 twice. He's guarding it once. He pulls the rook back to c2, but he's also in time pressure, so that's an issue for him. With that being said, that's a pawn. If knight takes, I take. Yeah, that's just a pawn, bro. I'm also hitting the rook. If knight takes, I takes, and I'm threatening this. And my e6 pawn is always guarded on by my h6 rook. All right, so he didn't take. He did not take. Now he's threatening to take. What to do with this bishop? I'm thinking pawn c5, and if he takes, pawn takes. That just looks ugly, to be honest. Let's just pull the bishop back. Now I can think about playing pawn e4. So, okay, rook e2, that's also a drawback mistake. Moving the rook from c2 no longer guards the pawn on c4. So let's take on c4, hit the unprotected rook. Good thing is my queen guards my pawn, and now once he doubles up on the file, we're still not going to give him the pawn. So what I'm thinking about here is bishop d4 takes, but then at that point he has rook takes. So let's just play pawn to e5 here. Knight d2, and if I check, oh, I'm actually going to check because if he blocks, he loses the knight, so he has to block with the actual knight or the queen. But because I'm ahead by 2 pawns, we're going to just trade the queens off the board. He took with the king, another drawback mistake because the king no longer guards the pawn on h2. So let's now take on h2. He go backs to attack the king, and now we're just going to pull the rook back. All right, knight e4 hits the bishop. Let's just pull the bishop back to e7. We're ahead by 3. Oh, nah. Should have actually pulled the bishop to d8 to guard my c pawn. Knight back to c3. He's trying to get the knight here. And if I play c6 to prevent that, he puts the knight back here. Or just move the knight somewhere. But I'm still going to play c6 and then I'm going to play c5. Pawn to b5. Hmm. Okay, before we respond to that, let's play d5 and threaten the fork. So if he takes his fork, which is what he did, now he's just forked and he's losing. Thing is, the guy just has no time on the clock. Poor guy. He's trying to pre-move. The rooks are on the same line. Hit him with bishop f6, pushing the pawn. I don't care, bro. That's a rook. Even though he's gonna queen, we're just gonna sack our rook for the queen. And once we move the king, we're now just ahead in material. Guy has 10 seconds on the clock. I have a minute on the clock. Rook on the second is just winning. He's hitting the bishop. Let's apply more pressure to his f2 pawn. Didn't guard the pawn. We take on f2. It's just bad for him. He wants to check on the 7th, but he resigns. But more Dutch defense against 1800 players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1800. Let's get some more Dutch defense in. Okay, immediate knight c3 is interesting. Let's just go knight to f6. Look like it's gonna be some Joe Bava type of business. I'm still gonna play e6 followed by bishop to b4 though. So bishop to g5. Let's just go e6 here. If a3, we go bishop e7. If e3 or anything else, we go bishop b4. Maybe he's gonna play knight f3 here. Okay, I wasn't really expecting him to give up his bishop for the knight like that, but I guess his idea is to play e4, and that's actually not a bad idea, to be honest, but he didn't even play that. He played knight f3, so let's spin the knight, which means e4 is now not possible, and we're now going to just get our regular setup. Pawn e3, king is going to get castled, queen d3, which means he's more than likely trying to castle on the queen side. But let's just play b6 here. Bishop b7 or even bishop a6 becomes an idea. He castles on the queen side. Interesting. Bishop a6, there's queen d2. Doesn't do much though. So let's just put the bishop on b7. If a3, then I'm still going to take. Actually, if a3, maybe I shouldn't take. Maybe I should just keep the bishop. Because if I take, this is under attack. But let's see. Because usually I shouldn't mind losing this pawn. Because I can always put a rook on the same line as his king. So bishop to e2. Bishop a6 still doesn't work. So let's play pawn to d6. Plan is to play knight d7. We're just trying to finish our development here. Pawn a3. Now we get him to push pawns on the side that his king is on. Now we take. So we're definitely going to see queen takes. Knight d7, there's queen takes c7, and I could be losing the game. I would want him to take, but not if it attacks my bishop. That's the thing. That's the thing. So let's actually just protect this pawn. Yeah, let's just protect this pawn with... Nah, it's queen e7. I can't even play knight d7. That's also another thing. So I'm actually going to play rook c8 to protect the pawn. So then I'm able to play knight d7 and pawn c5. And I'm going to try to start an attack on the king that way. But we have to finish our development first. His development is finished. His king is castled. His rooks are connected. I am one move away from completing development. Queen moves over to b3, which means there's definitely some attack on my e6 pawn, which is already being guarded. I think he's just trying to move his queen off the same line as my rook, which is smart. Let's go knight d7 here. Pawn c5 is definitely an idea, but once he takes on c5, d6 is going to be weak, but then I'm able to take with the knight. And if he allows me to take, then it opens the file for my rook. So I like my chances there. The thing is though, once I takes and he plays knight takes, my e6 pawn is gonna be weak. So it's gonna be a very crazy game. So pawn h4, he's trying to attack. Pawn c5, I'm trying to attack. If he takes, knight takes, hits the queen. Yeah, let's do that. I don't think he's gonna take. If I take, he's gonna play knight takes and hit this pawn, and then I could play knight c5, hit the queen. If you guys noticed that in this video series that we're doing, once they castle on the queen side, there's a lot of time when I play c5, with the whole idea of just trying to get my rook on this file. Oh, that's what he's trying to do. Knight g5. Now there's two pieces attacking my pawn. Okay, what if I just play bishop to d5, hit the queen? And if he plays bishop c4, I takes, queen takes, and then play pawn d5, hit the queen. Let's do that. Let's go bishop d5, hit the queen. If the queen decides to move, we could take on d4, we could chase away the knight. Not planning on taking that pawn on g2 because it hits the bishop, it puts the rook on the same line as my king. That could cause some drama. So bishop c4 we take. We force the queen to take. Now we play d5, hit the queen. And I'm assuming he's going to play queen b5, just trying to get back the tempo on the knight. But I'm just going to play rook c7. It's also helping me to double up my rooks on the c file, which means once I take on d4, then his c7 pawn is going to be under attack. And I like the placement of my knight on d7 because if his knight goes back to f3, then he's also not going to be able to lodge his knight on my e5 square. I like my position. Eventually, I'm also just going to play a6 and just chase that queen out of my half of the board. On f4, I know exactly what he's trying to do. He's trying to play knight f3 to e5, which is fine. Let's play a6 first because remember, guys, we do not allow pieces on our half of the board. So we're trying to get rid of this queen and get rid of this knight. I think he's going to pull the knight back eventually. His queen, now he has to pull his queen back. Maybe queen b3. I swing my rook on the file, trying to take on d4, eventually take on c2. Queen went all the way back to e2. If I play rook c1 and then he takes on a6, I take on d4 and his c2 pawn could be hanging. So let's go rook to c8 here, leaving my pawn unprotected. But if that point he decides to play rook d2 or anything else he plays, actually, I'm more than likely going to play b5 next. I would love to play b5, b4 because I'm trying to open as many lines. I shouldn't be too afraid of queen to a6, but in some cases I'm kind of afraid of it. In some cases. Pawn to a5. All right, if I takes, he takes with this or this, anything, I takes, queen takes, and that's going to be good for white. Because mathematically, two rooks are just better than a queen. Maybe he plays, okay, maybe I should play h6 now. And just, yeah. Because if he plays h6 and then I play g6, the knight stays on g6 forever. I don't think I should care about that though. Because the knight by itself is not going to checkmate my king. If he plays h6, I just play g6. I'm also thinking of just taking the free pawn, to be honest, but that would be too greedy. Rook to a2. Why that move? The move I want to play here is b4. I don't want to think too much about what happens if he plays. Oh yeah, we're still gonna play b4 actually, because if he takes, we take here and then we take here. That's the idea. So the queen is never able to take on a6 if I'm able to take on d4 and then take on c2. And I'm basically trying to open more lines for my pieces. So he took. Let's take. All of a sudden, the rook now has the file, and I can now plan on rolling these pawns up the board. I don't know why he's trying to double up his rooks on the h file. Maybe he's trying to sack the knight and then push. But if that happens, I'm just going to play g6. If he pushed, then I'm going to push. So what he's doing with his rooks is, I don't know. Let's just start rolling. Let's just start rolling the pawn up the board. Open more lines for our pieces. I'd love for him to sack because it doesn't work. Right, pawn to b3. That's not really good because now I'm able to play b3 after I play a4. That is because if he takes on a4, which is what he did, I now play b3, and then he's not able to play something like c3, which means his c2 pawn is now dead. He has two defenders. I now have three attackers. If he moves the pawn, we take the pawn. Even if he moves this pawn, we still take on c2 because we're just going to be winning the queen. So this is where the game ends. This is how we attack with the Dutch on the queen side, and I hope you guys have been seeing how we attack with the Dutch on the king side. And by the way, this is a free queen, by the way. I haven't been saying this a lot in this video, so please like the video if you haven't liked it as yet. And if you want to play against me, just comment your username along with the ELO that you're trying to represent. King takes. Now we're finally going to chase that knight away, and then we're going to try to get our king in the game. Well, not the king, our queen over in the attack. And he resigns. More Dutch defense against 1900 level players. Stick around. Opponent is now 1900. Let's play some more Dutch defense. Pawn c4. knight f6, trying to control the light squares here. This guy have represented the 1800s, by the way, so now he's 1900. That's very proud of him. Pawn e6, I'm trying to play pawn bishop b4. Bishop g5, we still play bishop b4. I'm not gonna lie. In the 1700 game, the guy played a3, and that was definitely something to look on. Queen b3, we're always gonna take on c3 once we're harassed. Get the king out the center of the board, and you guys also should know the plan with the king side pieces. I mean, the bishop is going to b7, the knight is going to d7. So let's go pawn d6, knight d7 first. Wasn't expecting this guy to give up the bishop for the knight this early. I'm actually going to take with the rook because I know the importance of swinging my rook over. But then he plays g3. So he's basically saying, I'm going to play g3 so that way you don't play g3. And that makes a lot of sense. So maybe I should play b6 as early as possible. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually going to play bishop to d7. And then if he plays bishop to g2, I play bishop c6. And I still manage to finish my development. But that thing that he just did, like fianchettoing his bishop is a very nice idea. Okay, I need to ensure that there's no pawn to d5 or pawn to b5 tricks. Let's go knight d7. And if he castles his king, I was planning on playing rook to h3. But then he plays pawn to h4. Um, okay, what's his idea? His king is in the center, so I'm definitely trying to open the center. Pawn to d5. Pawn to d5 here is maybe a plan for him. And I also want to play pawn b6 so that way my bishop is not trapped. But let me just get my rooks in the game first. Maybe doubling up on the f file is an idea. Yo, the guy castled on the queen side. So the whole idea of attacking on the king side out the window. Now we have to attack on the queen side. So I'm going to play a6 followed by b5. And okay, pawn to d5 is very strong. Almost get my bishop trapped. I forgot about d5, by the way. So now I have to play bishop to b5. Luckily, I'm not afraid of him taking on c7 because it kind of exposes king, so I'm fine with that. Otherwise, I'm thinking of playing knight e5 to protect c7. Pawn a4, knight d4. Whoa. Okay. Still not afraid of my bishop being captured. Um, he's trying to put his knight on the e6 square. I don't think we want to allow that. So let's play knight c5, defending against that. If he takes the bishop, we take with the pawn and the rook is active. Knight e4 could be an idea, but this is a very strong knight going to the e6 square. All right, so king to b1 was played first. You know, just like a waiting move. The whole idea of this rook being on f6, I don't think it helps me over here anymore. I think it's best if I try to do an attack on this side. There is always going to be knight e4, which hits the queen. He's most likely going to either move the queen or take. My bishop is best placed on d7 actually. Bishop d7, there's pawn b4 though. Knight e4, queen takes c7. I don't want to allow. Queen takes c7 could be a bishop d7, pawn b4, and then once he plays queen takes c7, sure that's going to be an issue. Maybe knight e4 hits the queen, and if queen c7, I fork. Knight e4 hits the queen, and if he takes, I check. So luckily, pawn b4 is not as strong as it seems right now because I have this knight e4 idea. But this guy's playing very fast. You know, he definitely looks like he knows what he's doing. Pawn to f3 prevents knight e4, so maybe pawn b4 is really coming. All right. The good thing is his e3 pawn is slightly weak because it can't be guarded by a pawn anymore. So I'm thinking of rook e8, pawn b4, knight a4 hits the queen, and if queen c7, we take on e3. At that point, my bishop is just hanging though, and then my rook is gonna be hanging. I have no checks on his king. Well, I have this check. My rook is gonna be hanging. I don't think I want to allow that. So let's play a5 to prevent b4. Very decent prophylactic move. And then I want to attack this way. Pawn to g4. Yeah, that's a weird move, bro. That's definitely a weird move. He's trying to attack, but he's creating too many weaknesses in his position. Like once I take, e3 remains weak. My rook could get access to his second rank, which could be the move I play right now, actually, because it hits the unprotected bishop. There is rook to d2, knight c4 hits the queen. If bishop takes, I check, and that's a fork. So rook to f2 is just a nice move. Rook on the 7 is in heaven. Rook to d2 immediately loses the game. Is it rook g1? Is it bishop h3? His g4 pawn is also hanging. So funny enough, I still have some attack on the king side, or some attack coming from the king side. All right, guys, we saw rook to d2 on the chessboard, and this is just game over. It's game over, bro. It's crazy how I'm beating these high-rated players in less moves. I mean, knight d2 is just a fork, which means if he moves the queen, we take the rook with check. And the moment he takes our bishop, we play queen takes check, and then his h1 rook will fall with check. So we're 20 moves into the Dutch, and we could be possibly seeing a resignation here because we're basically about to win an entire rook. Okay, so bishop takes, we check, that's a fork, exposed king, unprotected rook. He moves the king out the way. We take the unprotected rook, and this will lead to checkmate. He has to block, and the opponent resigns. More Dutch defense against 2,000 rated players. Stick around. Opponent is now 2,000. Let's play some more Dutch defense. All right, so pawn c4. Now we play knight f6, just get as much control over the e4 square as possible. Knight c3, we play pawn e6, and the plan is to play bishop b4, get rid of this knight, and get all the control over the e4 square, just the light squares in the center of the board. Queen c2, bishop b4, okay, bishop to g5, and now we castle. And eventually, we're going to be able to force him to give up this bishop for the knight with some queen e8 to queen h5 maneuver. But for now, we're just trying to finish our development. Anytime the bishop is under attack, just take on c3. We're planning on giving that bishop up for the knight anyways. So queen takes, we could play b6, bishop b7. We could also play d6, knight d7. It doesn't really matter. In some cases, it matters a lot, but just the setup is what you want to get. All right, so knight to f3. Let's go knight d7. Eventually, queen e8 to h5 is going to be an idea. Pawn b6 to b7 will happen, and they usually always just castle on the king side. So pawn e3. Let's go pawn b6. Let's just focusing on finish our development now. Bishop d3, we go bishop b7, and okay, it's just a bit harder for him to castle. I mean, castling is okay, but should be able to take and expose his king. Was expecting bishop e2, unless he castle on the queen side, which all of a sudden the game is just going to get crazy. Rook to c1 was played. Now, I think he's just trying to keep his king in the center of the board for a bit, which is not terrible right now because I'm not seeing exactly how I'm going to open the center of the board and get to his king. But first thing I'm going to do is deal with this spin by playing queen e8 with some ideas of playing queen h5 or even queen g6. Because with the queen on g6, whenever he takes on f6, his g pawn is going to be under attack, and that could be an issue. D4. It also allows me to play knight e4. Knight e4, takes, knight d2, queen g6, and I should be winning the g2 pawn here, to be honest. Now, queen g2 takes. Wait, if queen g2 when he takes, I don't necessarily have to take back immediately. I could take on g2 first, hit the rook. Oh, nah, but then once the rook move and I take, he takes on g7. So queen g2 takes, knight takes. G2 is under attack. There's knight to h4, but then queen h5 hits the knight back, and okay, now we're winning the pawn on f3. So it seems as if I'm going to be winning the pawn. If I'm going to be winning the pawn either way, then I prefer knight e4. Knight e4 hits the queen. What if he just moves the queen? Then I takes, and then we're winning the g pawn. Knight e4, takes, hit the knight. If knight back, I go here. Yeah, let's go knight e4. Knight e4 seems to be working here. Usually, the bishop is annoying on g5, but if you know exactly how to deal with that bishop on g5, it's going to make things even better for you. All right, so he took. We're going to take with the pawn, so that way it opens the file for the rook, and it's also going to make f3 hard for him. And then after knight d2, we play queen to g6, hits the unprotected bishop, which is on the same line as this unprotected pawn. This is called a skewer. He could play h5, but then I'm just going to play h6. So might as well he just moves the bishop now, give me the pawn, and move his rook somewhere. All right, so bishop went back to f4. Are there any sack? Not seeing any sack right now, but there is a free pawn that we're definitely going to take. So he chose not to castle because I guess he was seeing the attack that was coming. But this is what could happen when you leave the king in the center. Rook to f1, I'm guessing. Pawn to e5 hits the bishop, takes, queen takes, swing this rook in the game. So rook to f1 was played. How do we continue here? All right, so I need to find ways to get my a rook in the game. So I'm going to play the move a5. So that way, if I take on b4 and he takes, my rook gets the file. I'm also thinking about some ways to get my bishop on this diagonal. So if anytime he pushes the c pawn and I maybe take and then I play bishop here, then his rook is going to be trapped. So guy has to be super careful, but black is just better here. And if this rook moves away and I play e5 and then this bishop has to move, I could be winning the f pawn depending on where he puts the bishop. All right, pawn b5 just shut down all plans of a bishop going to a6, but it makes it harder for him to play c5, so I'm fine with that. Pawn to e5 would be something I would like to play. Wait, there's actually an idea here. If pawn e5 and he takes, I could hit him with knight c5. And then this fork is just going to be something. If he takes, I fork him. Hmm. Yeah, let's go with pawn e5. I like that move because the pawn on b4 no longer covers the c5 square. If he takes, there's knight takes, but I wouldn't really want him to trade this bishop. Like I'm thinking about sacking the rook for the bishop, but it's not working. Hmm. He didn't even take it. I think this is going to make it even better for me because I'm still going to take. If queen takes, my knight still gets to the c5 square. And if pawn takes, I am sure pawn to e3 has to be good. Like it's okay, queen takes. My e4 pawn is guarded, fully guarded. Knight on c5. This is like the best square for a knight right now. Knight d3 is coming. Okay, now we need to focus on this a rook. We need to get this a rook in the game. So maybe rook to e8 is coming next. King to e2, okay. Which means if I play this move, he moves the rook. So right now I have two attackers and he has three defenders. Adding a third attacker right now won't really help. And he's just going to move the rook. What I could do is prepare to add a fourth attacker by getting this rook in the game. So, well, I mean, I also don't want him to be able to play rook to g1 though. So I'm going to start. I'm going to start with knight to d3. So that way, any rook g1 move, I should be able to take on f2. Oh, or he could play immediate rook g1. That's well, or that's what he thought, bro. But for one, I can always just take the rook with check and he's losing. But let's calculate the forcing moves first. What if I play rook takes f2? That's a check, bro. This is GG's. And if the king moves, then we grab the rook. If rook takes g2, bishop takes g2, queen takes g2 check, the king still has to move. Once the king move, we grab this rook with check. Once the king move, that's going to be a checkmate. So rook takes f2 here is just GG's. Yeah, him playing rook to g1 was just a blunder, but these are the types of attack that you get in the Dutch. This is actually just mate because if he moves the king, that's mate. If he takes, that leads to mate. What else is there? And he resigns. Please subscribe.